A woman from a massacred village runs for her life through the wilderness, hunted by the same soldiers who destroyed everything she loved. The man who saves her is the enemy she was taught to hate. But when his former brothers in arms come to kill them both, survival will demand the impossible: trust. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The smoke rose in black columns against the dawn sky, twisting and coiling like serpents born from hell itself. Ayana ran through the tall grass, her moccasins slapping against the hard earth, her lungs burning with each ragged breath. Behind her, the screams had finally stopped. The village, her village, was silent now except for the crackle of flames devouring everything she had ever known. She didn't look back. Looking back meant death. The wound in her side throbbed with every step, a jagged slash from a soldier's blade when she'd fought free of his grip. Blood soaked through the deerskin dress her mother had sewn just 2 moons ago. Her mother, who now lay among the ashes. Her father, the chief who had refused to trade his daughter for rifles and whiskey, who had spit in Colonel Rourke's face and told him no daughter of his would ever belong to a white devil. Rourke had smiled at that. Then he'd given the order. Ayana's feet hit a patch of loose stones and she stumbled, catching herself against a twisted juniper tree. Her vision swam. The sun was climbing higher now, merciless and bright, and the open prairie offered no shelter. She could hear them in the distance, horses, men shouting, the jangle of spurs and sabers. They were hunting her like an animal. "Find the girl!" The voice carried on the wind, cold and precise. Rourke's voice. "I want her alive. She's mine." Rage flared hot in Ayana's chest, momentarily drowning the pain. Alive. He wanted her alive so he could break her, parade her as a trophy, proof that even the proud tribes could be conquered and possessed. She would die first. She would throw herself off a cliff, drown herself in the river, anything but let that monster touch her again. But her body had other ideas. Her legs were weakening, her steps growing clumsy. The blood loss was catching up to her. She needed to find cover, needed to bind the wound, needed water. The river was too far south. They'd expect her to run that way. West then, into the rocky foothills where the terrain grew rough and unforgiving, where white men rarely went. She pushed forward, forcing her body into a stumbling jog. The grass gave way to scrub brush and scattered boulders. Good. Harder to track. Her father had taught her how to move through the wilderness, how to read the land, how to disappear. But he'd never prepared her for this. Running alone, wounded, with death snapping at her heels. A gunshot cracked the air. Too close. She dove behind a boulder, pressing her body against the sun-warmed stone. Hoofbeats pounded past, 3 riders moving fast, their blue uniforms dark with trail dust. Not regular army. Rourke's men were deserters, renegades, soldiers who'd stayed behind after the war ended because they preferred the lawlessness of the frontier. Butchers wearing Patriots' colors. "Split up," one of them shouted. "She can't have gone far bleeding like that." Ayana waited until the sound faded, then forced herself to move again. The sun climbed higher. Her tongue felt thick and dry. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding as heavily, but the pain was changing, deepening, spreading through her ribs like poison. She needed help. But there was no help out here. No village, no people, no friendly faces for miles. Only enemies, only soldiers, only death. By midday, she'd reached the foothills proper. The terrain rose in sharp ridges, studded with pine and aspen, cut through with narrow ravines that offered both cover and danger. She descended into one, following a dry stream bed that would hide her tracks. Her body moved on instinct now, legs pumping mechanically while her mind drifted in and out of focus. She thought of her little brother, Swift Arrow, only 7 winters old. Had he run when the shooting started? Had he hidden like she'd taught him? Or had they... No, she couldn't think that way. Not now. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford. The ravine opened into a wider canyon, and that's when she saw it. Smoke. Not the thick black smoke of burning lodges, but a thin gray ribbon rising from somewhere ahead. A campfire. Someone was here. Every instinct screamed danger, but she had no choice. She was dying. The wound, the blood loss, the sun. It was only a matter of time. Maybe whoever it was would help. Maybe they'd shoot her and end it quickly. Either way, she couldn't run anymore. Ayana climbed out of the ravine, her movement slow and clumsy now. She crested a low rise and stopped. Below, nestled in a small valley where a creek ran clear and cold, stood a ranch. Nothing fancy. A log cabin with a stone chimney, a small barn, a corral holding 2 horses and a mule. Laundry hung on a line, flapping in the breeze. Chickens scratched in the dirt. It looked almost peaceful, except for the man. He stood near the woodpile, axe in hand, splitting logs with efficient, powerful strokes. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded shirt and worn denim. Dark hair, a beard shadowing his jaw. White. Ayana's hand went to the knife at her belt, the only weapon she had left. She should turn around, run, find another way. But her legs wouldn't obey. The world tilted sideways, and she realized she was falling. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the man dropping his axe and running toward her. Caleb Ward had been splitting wood for the better part of an hour when he saw her collapse. At first he thought it was a deer, something moving on the ridge above the ranch, silhouetted against the bright sky. Then the shape stumbled, fell, and he realized with a jolt that it was a person. A woman, from the looks of it, and she was hurt. His first instinct was to reach for the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. The frontier taught you to be cautious, but something about the way she'd fallen, not diving for cover, not moving tactically, just falling, made him leave the gun behind. He ran instead, boots pounding the hard earth, covering the distance in seconds. She lay face down in the dirt, long black hair spread around her like a dark halo. Native. Young, maybe 20, and bleeding. Jesus, Caleb muttered, dropping to one knee beside her. He checked for breath, for a pulse. Both there, but weak. The wound in her side was ugly, deep, probably from a blade. Hours old by the look of it. She'd been running for a long time. He glanced up at the ridge she'd come from, scanning for threats. Nothing moved. But that didn't mean they weren't there. If she was running, someone was chasing. And if that someone showed up here, things were going to get complicated fast. Caleb made a decision. He scooped her up, surprised by how light she was, and carried her toward the cabin. She didn't wake, didn't even stir. Bad sign. He shouldered the door open and laid her on the narrow bed in the corner, the same bed he'd slept in for 3 years since leaving the cavalry, since walking away from the uniform, the orders, the killing. "Stay with me," he said quietly, though he doubted she could hear. He moved fast, gathering supplies, clean water from the basin, strips of cloth, the bottle of whiskey he kept for emergencies. His hands worked from memory, skills learned during the war when field medicine was the difference between living and dying. He cut away the deerskin dress around the wound, trying to be respectful, trying not to think about the fact that this woman probably hated everything he represented. The gash was clean but deep. No infection yet, but it would come if he didn't act fast. He poured whiskey over it, then stitched it closed with steady hands, the way the army surgeon had taught him years ago. She stirred once, a soft moan escaping her lips, but didn't wake. Caleb wrapped the wound, then covered her with a blanket. He stepped back, studying her face. Even unconscious and pale, there was a strength to her features, high cheekbones, a proud nose, lips pressed tight even in sleep. A fighter. She'd made it this far after all, but who was chasing her? Caleb walked to the window and looked out at the valley. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the land. He should be making supper, tending the animals, finishing his chores. Instead, he was harboring a fugitive. Because that's what she was. He knew it in his gut. People didn't run through the wilderness with knife wounds unless they were running from something, or someone. He was still standing at the window when he saw the dust on the horizon. Riders. 3 of them, moving fast along the creek trail. Blue uniforms. Caleb's jaw tightened. He recognized those uniforms, or rather, the bastardized version of them. Renegades. Deserters who'd stayed behind after the war, forming their own private armies in the lawless territories. He'd heard stories about them. Heard about a colonel who ruled a band of cutthroats like a warlord. Rourke. Colonel Marcus Rourke. The name made his stomach turn. He'd never served under Rourke, but he'd heard enough. A man who believed the frontier belonged to the strong, who took what he wanted and burned the rest. the kind of officer who made Caleb leave the army in the first place. The riders were getting closer. Caleb glanced back at the woman on his bed, then at the rifle on the wall. He had maybe 5 minutes to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. He'd walked away from war. He'd built this ranch to escape the violence, the blood, the endless cycle of killing. He'd promised himself he was done with all of it, but leaving someone to die wasn't peace. It was cowardice. Caleb grabbed the rifle, checked the load, and stepped onto the porch. Truck. The 3 riders pulled up in front of the cabin as the sun touched the mountain peaks. They didn't dismount, just sat their horses in a loose semicircle, hands resting on their pistols. The leader was a sergeant, gray-haired and hard-eyed, with a scar running down the left side of his face. The other 2 were younger, meaner, the kind of men who enjoyed their work. "Afternoon," the sergeant said. His voice was flat, businesslike. "Name's Kane. We're looking for a fugitive. Indian girl, about 20, long black hair, wounded. You seen anyone like that?" Caleb kept his rifle pointed at the ground, but his finger rested near the trigger. "Nope, haven't seen anyone." Kane studied him for a long moment. "You sure about that? We tracked her this way. Blood trail leads right up that ridge." "Lots of ridges around here," Caleb said evenly. "Lots of ways to go." "That's true." Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be thorough?" "I do mind, actually." The smile vanished. "That's not real friendly, mister. We're on official business." "Official business?" Caleb let a hint of contempt enter his voice. "You boys don't look official. You look like deserters wearing stolen uniforms. So unless you've got a warrant signed by a federal marshal, I'd appreciate it if you turned around and rode out of here." One of the younger soldiers bristled. "You got a mouth on you, old man." "Old enough to know trouble when I see it," Caleb replied. He raised the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it, but making the threat clear. "And old enough not to care much for men who hunt down wounded women." Kane's hand drifted closer to his pistol. "You served, didn't you? I can tell." "What unit?" "Doesn't matter. I'm out." "Once a soldier, always a soldier," Kane said. "You should understand. We're following orders." "Whose orders?" Caleb asked, though he already knew the answer. "Colonel Rourke's. And the colonel wants that girl. She belongs to him." "Nobody belongs to anybody," Caleb said quietly. "Not anymore. War's over." "Not out here it ain't." Kane straightened in his saddle. "Last chance, friend. Tell us where she is, or we tear this place apart." Caleb's mind raced. 3 armed men against 1. Not good odds. But if he let them search the cabin, they'd find her. And if they found her, she was dead. Or worse. He thought about the woman lying unconscious on his bed, the knife wound in her side, the strength it must have taken to run this far. He thought about all the orders he'd followed during the war, all the villages he'd helped burn, all the people he'd stood by and watched suffer because a superior officer said it was necessary. All the times he'd told himself he was just doing his duty. He was done with duty. "You need to leave," Caleb said, and this time he raised the rifle all the way, sighting down the barrel at Kane's chest. "Right now." The clearing went very still. The younger soldiers reached for their guns, but Kane held up a hand, stopping them. The sergeant's eyes narrowed, calculating. 1 man with a rifle against 3 with pistols, close quarters. Somebody was going to die, maybe all of them. "You're making a mistake," Kane said softly. "Probably," Caleb agreed, "but it's my mistake to make." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Kane nodded slowly, as if filing something away for later. "We'll remember this. Colonel, don't forget when people cross him." "I'll lose sleep over that," Caleb said. Kane turned his horse, and the other 2 followed. They rode out slowly, deliberately, making it clear they weren't afraid. Just postponing. At the edge of the clearing, Kane looked back. "See you real soon, friend." Then they were gone, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Caleb stood on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then he lowered the rifle, surprised to find his hand shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from the realization of what he'd just done. He'd threatened former soldiers. He'd protected a fugitive. He'd made himself an enemy of Colonel Rourke. There was no going back now. He turned and walked back into the cabin, The woman still lay unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Caleb set the rifle on the table and sat down heavily in the chair by the window. The last light of day painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, beautiful and indifferent. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. The woman didn't answer, but somewhere in the darkness he knew Rourke's men were regrouping, planning, coming back. Ayanna woke to the smell of smoke and coffee. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was home, waking in her father's lodge, the morning fire crackling and her mother preparing breakfast. Then the pain in her side reminded her, the massacre, the running, She sat up fast, too fast, and the room spun. Hands pressed her back down, gentle but firm. "Easy," a voice said, male, deep, speaking English with the flat accent of the Northern Territories. "You're safe, for now." Ayanna's vision cleared. She was in a cabin, lying on a bed that smelled of pine and leather. A white man sat beside her, the same one she'd seen splitting wood before she collapsed. In the daylight filtering through the window, she could see him more clearly. 30, maybe older. Hard face, but not cruel. Eyes that had seen things, same as hers. She reached for her knife. It wasn't there. "Looking for this?" He held up the blade, then set it on the table within her reach. "Figured you'd want it close. Can't say I blame you." Ayanna stared at him, trying to understand. White men didn't return weapons. White men didn't show kindness. White men, "They came looking for you," he said quietly. "Rourke's men, 3 of them. I sent them away, but they'll be back, probably with more." "Why?" The word came out as a croak, her throat dry as dust. "Why'd I help you?" He shrugged. Seemed like the right thing to do. "I am your enemy." "Are you?" He studied her face. "Funny. You don't look like my enemy. You look like someone who's had a real bad day." Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the exhaustion, Ayanna felt a flicker of something that might have been amusement. This white man was strange. Dangerous, maybe, but strange. "They will kill you," she said, "for helping me." "Probably." He stood, walked to the stove, and poured coffee into a tin cup. He brought it back, helped her sit up enough to drink. The coffee was bitter and hot, and the best thing she'd ever tasted. "But I've been meaning to leave this place anyway. Getting boring. You joke, while death comes." "It's either joke or panic," he said. "I prefer joking." He sat back down, his expression growing serious. "I'm Caleb Ward. Used to be lieutenant in the cavalry, but I walked away, built this ranch 3 years ago. Been trying to mind my own business ever since." "You failed," Ayanna said. "Yeah," he agreed. "I noticed." She drank more coffee, studying him over the rim of the cup, trying to understand what kind of man this was. A soldier who walked away. A white man who helped his enemy. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. "I am Ayanna," she said finally, "daughter of Chief Neshoba. He is dead. They are all dead." "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" Anger flared hot in her chest. "Your people did this. Your soldiers. Your colonel." "Not my colonel," Caleb said quietly. "Not my people. Not anymore." "You wear the guilt the same." "Maybe." He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just sat there, accepting her anger like he deserved it. Maybe he did. "But right now we've got bigger problems. Rourke wants you alive. I'm guessing he's not the type to give up easy." Ayanna closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. She wanted to hate this man. She wanted to drive her knife into his heart and run back into the wilderness. But she couldn't. She was too weak, too wounded. And he was right. Rourke wouldn't stop. Not until she was dead or captured. "What will you do?" she asked. "We," Caleb corrected. "What will we do? You're stuck with me now, whether you like it or not." "I do not like it." "Fair enough." He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the valley. "We can't stay here. They'll come back, probably tonight or tomorrow. We need to move. Head into the mountains, find somewhere to hole up until you're healed enough to travel properly. And then? And then I don't know. But we'll figure it out." He turned back to her, and she saw something in his eyes that surprised her. Not pity, not guilt, just resolve. "I made my choice when I sent those men away. I'm not changing my mind now. Ayana looked at him for a long moment. This strange white man who'd stitched her wound, given her coffee, returned her knife. Who'd made himself an enemy of the most dangerous man on the frontier to protect someone he didn't know? She didn't understand him, but maybe she didn't have to. We leave tonight, she said. Agreed. Caleb nodded. I'll pack supplies. You rest. And Ayana? What? Welcome to the worst decision of your life. Despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the grief that threatened to swallow her whole, Ayana almost smiled. I have made worse, she said. Ted. They left 2 hours before dawn. Caleb moved through the cabin in the darkness, packing what they'd need: food, water, ammunition, blankets, medical supplies. He worked quickly, efficiently, the old cavalry training coming back without thought. Travel light, move fast, leave nothing behind that could be used against you. He glanced at Ayana, who sat on the edge of the bed pulling on her moccasins. She moved carefully, favoring her wounded side, but she didn't complain. Strong woman, stronger than she looked. Can you ride? He asked. I can do what I must. Good enough. He led her outside where the horses waited, already saddled. His gelding, a steady bay named Smoke, and the mare he kept for trading, a smaller paint. He helped Ayana mount, saw her wince as the movement pulled at her stitches, but she settled into the saddle without a word. Caleb swung up onto Smoke, taking one last look at the ranch. 3 years of his life. 3 years of peace, of trying to forget the war, of pretending he could be a different man. Gone now. Rourke's men would come back and they'd burn it, probably. Search for clues about where he'd gone, maybe kill his chickens out of spite. Are you sad? Ayana asked quietly. To leave your home? Caleb considered that. Was he? The cabin was just wood and stone. The land was just land. He'd built it to escape his past. But maybe you couldn't escape the past. Maybe it just followed you, waiting for the right moment to drag you back in. It wasn't really home, he said. Just a place I was hiding. And now? Now we're both hiding. He turned Smoke toward the mountains. Come on, we've got a long ride ahead. They rode north, following the creek into the foothills. Caleb navigated by starlight, sticking to the rocky ground where they'd leave fewer tracks. Beside him, Ayana rode in silence, swaying slightly in the saddle, but staying upright through sheer will. The sky was beginning to pale in the east when they heard it. Distant shouts, the crack of gunfire. Caleb reined in, turning to look back. Down in the valley, orange flames lit the darkness. His ranch was burning. They work fast, he said quietly. Ayana said nothing, but he saw her hand tighten on the reins. They both knew what that fire meant. Rourke had sent his men back, and finding Caleb gone, they'd destroyed everything. It was a message, a promise. How many? Ayana asked. Hard to say. 5, maybe 6. Caleb counted the tiny figures moving in the firelight. They'll pick up our trail come morning. We need to be deep in the mountains by then. They rode on as the sun rose, climbing higher into terrain that grew increasingly rugged. Pine forests gave way to aspen groves, then rocky slopes dotted with juniper. The air grew colder, thinner. Caleb pushed them hard, knowing they needed distance, needed the advantage of difficult ground. By mid-morning, they'd reached a narrow pass between 2 peaks. Caleb called a halt, letting the horses rest while he studied their back trail. Nothing yet, but it was only a matter of time. Water, Ayana said. She'd dismounted and was leaning against a boulder, her face pale. Caleb handed her a canteen. How's the wound? It is fine. You're a terrible liar, and you ask questions you do not want answered. She drank deeply, then splashed water on her face. How far to safety? Define safety. Somewhere they cannot follow. Caleb looked at the mountains rising ahead of them, peak after peak disappearing into the distance. There's a valley about 2 days north, sacred ground, or so I've heard. Your people sometimes use it for ceremonies. If we can make it there— No. Ayana's voice was sharp. We cannot go there. Why not? It is forbidden to outsiders. They would kill you. Better than Rourke killing us, Caleb pointed out. You do not understand. That place is protected by warriors. They do not ask questions. They do not show mercy. If they find you there, you die. And if we don't go there, Rourke catches us and we die anyway. Caleb met her eyes. I'll take my chances with your warriors. At least they fight with honor. Ayanna studied him, something shifting in her expression. You speak of honor, but you were a soldier. You burned villages. You killed my people. Yes, Caleb said simply. I did. I followed orders, and I did things I can't take back. That's why I left. That's why I built that ranch, to try to be something other than a killer. Didn't work out so well. Why did you help me? I told you. No. She stepped closer, her dark eyes boring into his. The truth. Why risk everything for someone you do not know? Someone whose people you once fought against? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how to answer that. The truth was complicated. The truth was that he'd seen too many wounded people die alone, too many villages burned, too many children left orphaned. The truth was that somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being able to live with himself. Because I'm tired of being the kind of man who looks away, he said finally. That simple enough for you? Ayanna held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded slowly. It will do. A sound drifted up from below. Voices, faint but growing closer. They both froze. They found our trail, Caleb said grimly. He could see them now, riders emerging from the tree line far below. 6 men, moving fast. We need to go, now. They mounted up and pushed deeper into the pass, the horses' hooves clattering on loose stone. Behind them, the voices grew louder, closer. Caleb's mind raced, calculating distances, angles, chances. They couldn't outrun mounted men forever. Ayanna was wounded, the horses were tired, and the terrain ahead was unknown. They needed an advantage. They needed... There! Ayanna pointed to a narrow ravine branching off from the main pass. We can lose them in there. Or get trapped. You have a better idea? Caleb didn't. He turned smoke toward the ravine, and they plunged into the shadows. The walls rose high on either side, barely wide enough for the horses. They moved in single file, Caleb leading, Ayanna behind. The ravine twisted and turned, climbing higher, growing narrower. Then they hit a dead end. Damn it, Caleb breathed. Ahead, the ravine terminated in a sheer rock face, maybe 30 feet high. No way around, no way up. They'd trapped themselves. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed off the stone walls. Get down, Caleb said, dismounting quickly. He pulled his rifle from the saddle and found a position behind a boulder. Stay low and stay quiet. Ayanna slid from her horse, her face tight with pain. She drew her knife, the only weapon she had. It looked pitifully small in her hand. The voices grew clearer, closer. Then they appeared at the mouth of the ravine. 3 riders, with more behind. Sergeant Kane rode in front, his scarred face splitting into a smile when he saw them. Well, well, he called out. End of the line, Ward. Caleb sighted down the rifle. Turn around and ride out. Last chance. Can't do that. Colonel's orders. Kane's hand rested on his pistol. We got no quarrel with you, not really. Just give us the girl and you can walk away. No. You really want to die for her? For some savage girl you don't even know? I know enough, Caleb said. I know Rourke massacred her village. I know he's hunting her like an animal. That's all I need to know. Kane shook his head, almost regretful. Should have stayed out of it, Ward. Should have just minded your business. Now you're going to die in this hole. And for what? For something that actually matters. The smile vanished from Kane's face. Take them. Everything happened at once. The soldiers drew their pistols, spurring their horses forward. Caleb fired, the rifle crack deafening in the confined space. The lead rider went down, clutching his shoulder. Caleb worked the lever, fired again, missed. The horses were panicking, screaming, adding to the chaos. A bullet spanged off the rock near his head. Caleb ducked, ejected the spent cartridge, fired again. Another man fell. But they were too close now, almost on top of them, and he had maybe 2 seconds before Ayanna moved. She came from the side, low and fast, her knife flashing in the dim light. She hit the nearest rider, dragging him from his saddle, the blade finding the gap between his ribs. The man's scream cut off abruptly. His horse bolted, crashing into another rider, creating more chaos. Caleb shot the last mounted soldier, then grabbed his pistol and fired at Cain, who'd taken cover behind a rock. The bullet struck stone, ricocheted, and Cain returned fire. The shot grazed Caleb's arm, hot and sharp, but he barely felt it. Adrenaline had him now, the old battle fury that made everything sharp and clear and simple. Kill or be killed, survive or die. He advanced, firing as he went, forcing Cain to scramble backward. The sergeant got off one more shot, wide, before Caleb was on him. They grappled, the pistol between them, fighting for control. Cain was strong, trained, desperate, but Caleb had fought in close quarters for years, had survived battles that would have broken lesser men. He wrenched the gun away and smashed the butt into Cain's face. The sergeant went down hard, blood streaming from his broken nose. Caleb leveled the pistol at his head. "Don't!" Cain gasped. "Please!" Caleb hesitated. He'd killed in battle, in the heat of combat, when it was kill or die. But this was different. This was execution. This was the line between soldier and murderer. "Go," he said quietly. "Tell Rourke I'm done running. Tell him if he wants her, he'll have to go through me." Cain stared up at him, blood on his face, fear in his eyes. Then he nodded and scrambled backward, finding his horse, mounting awkwardly. He kicked the animal into a gallop, disappearing down the ravine without looking back. Silence fell. Caleb stood there, breathing hard, the pistol still raised. Around him, 3 bodies lay in the dust. 3 men dead because of him. Because of the choice he'd made on his porch yesterday afternoon. "You should have killed him." Caleb turned. Ayanna stood a few feet away, her knife dripping red. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes, there was something ancient in those eyes, something that had seen too much death. "Maybe," Caleb said, "but I've killed enough. He will tell Rourke. They will come with more men." "I know." "Then why?" Caleb holstered the pistol, suddenly exhausted. "Because I'm trying to be better than I was. Doesn't always work, but I keep trying." Ayanna looked at the bodies, then back at him. "You are a strange man, Caleb Ward." "So I've been told." He checked his arm. Just a graze, bleeding, but not serious. "Can you climb?" She followed his gaze to the rock face at the end of the ravine. It looked impossible, sheer and smooth. But there were cracks, narrow ledges, places where a determined person might find purchase. "Can you?" she countered. Despite everything, Caleb smiled. "Guess we'll find out." Set. They climbed. It took an hour of scraped knuckles, burning muscles, and moments where death seemed certain. But they climbed, hauling themselves up inch by inch, leaving the horses below. At the top, they collapsed on solid ground, gasping, trembling with exhaustion. "We made it," Ayanna said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah." Caleb lay on his back, staring up at the sky. "We did." They rested for a few minutes, then forced themselves to move. They were on top of a ridge now, the land falling away in all directions. To the north, the sacred valley lay hidden somewhere in the maze of peaks. To the south, smoke rose from multiple campfires. Rourke's army, gathering. "He's bringing everyone," Caleb observed. "That's at least 20 men." "More will come," Ayanna said. "He will not stop. Not until I am dead or captured. Or until he's dead." Caleb looked at her. "That valley you mentioned, the sacred one. If we go there, will your people really kill me on sight?" "Yes? Maybe. I do not know." She seemed uncertain for the first time. Before the massacre they would have, but now? After what Rourke did? "I think they would listen, for a moment, at least." "A moment's all I need." "What will you say?" "The truth." Caleb started walking north toward the distant peaks. "That I'm done with their war. That I'm done watching innocent people die. That I'm willing to fight alongside them to stop Rourke." "They will not believe you." "Then I'll prove it." Ayanna caught up to him, walking at his side. "You know what you are choosing? If we go to the valley, if my people accept you, you can never go back to the white world. You will be hunted forever. Your old life will be gone." "My old life was gone the moment I pulled you inside my cabin," Caleb said. "I'm just being honest about it now." They walked in silence for a while, the sun climbing toward its zenith. The mountains rose before them, vast and unforgiving, offering both sanctuary and death in equal measure. "Why did you leave the army?" Ayanna asked suddenly. Caleb didn't answer right away. He thought about how to explain, how to put into words something he barely understood himself. "There was a village," he said finally. "Montana Territory. Winter camp. Maybe 60 people, mostly women and children. My commanding officer got orders to clear the area. I tried to tell him they weren't hostile, that they'd signed treaties. Didn't matter. Orders were orders. What happened? We burned it. All of it. When it was over, I walked through the ashes, and I couldn't anymore. I just couldn't. So I walked away. Deserted. Became a civilian. Built that ranch and tried to forget." "But you did not forget." "No," Caleb admitted. "You don't forget things like that. You just live with them." Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "My father said the white men were demons, that they had no honor, no mercy, no souls. I believed him. I hated all of you. And now? Now I think maybe demons are not born. Maybe they are made." She looked at him, and for the first time there was something in her eyes that wasn't hatred or suspicion, something almost like understanding. Maybe they can be unmade too. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and kept walking. Behind them, far to the south, Colonel Rourke's army prepared for war. Ahead, in the sacred valley, warriors who might kill them on sight waited unknowingly. And between the two forces, a former soldier and the daughter of a chief walked together, fugitives bound by violence and saved by an impossible choice. The frontier stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and brutal and unforgiving. But somewhere in that vast wilderness, Caleb thought, there had to be room for something other than hatred. There had to be. The sun climbed higher, and they walked on. They walked for 3 days through country that seemed determined to kill them. The mountains grew steeper, the air thinner, the nights colder than anything Caleb had experienced in his years on the frontier. They moved through pine forests so dense the sun barely penetrated, across boulder fields where one wrong step meant a broken ankle, along ridgelines where the wind cut like a blade. They had no horses now, no shelter except what they could build from branches and pine boughs, no certainty that they were even heading in the right direction. But they kept moving north, always north, toward the sacred valley that might offer sanctuary or death. Ayanna's wound was healing, but slowly. Caleb checked it each night when they made camp, cleaning it with water from mountain streams, rewrapping it with strips torn from his shirt. She never complained, never showed weakness, but he could see the toll it was taking, the way she moved more carefully each day, the tightness around her eyes, the pallor beneath her bronze skin. "We need to rest," he said on the third night, watching her sink down beside their small fire. "A full day, maybe 2. Give your body time to heal." "We do not have time," Ayanna replied. "Rourke comes." "Rourke's got 20 men to feed and move through this terrain. We're faster alone." Caleb poured water into his battered tin cup and handed it to her. "If we push too hard and that wound opens again, we're done. You know that." She drank, then stared into the fire. The flames cast shadows across her face, making her look older, harder. "My father used to say that rest is a luxury for the strong. The weak rest and die." "Your father sounds like he was a hell of a man." "He was." Her voice went soft, distant. "He was brave, wise. He protected his people. And now he is dead because he would not sell his daughter to a monster." Caleb added another branch to the fire, buying himself time to think about how to respond. He'd seen grief before, too much of it, and he knew there were no right words, no comfort that could fill that kind of hole. But he had to try. "He died protecting what mattered to him," Caleb said quietly. "That's not nothing. It is everything, and it is nothing." Ayanna looked at him, and in the firelight her eyes were bottomless pools of pain. "What good is honor when you are dead? What good is pride when your people are ashes? I would trade every moment of his bravery for one more day with him alive." "I know." "Do you?" There was an edge to her voice now, sharp as broken glass. "Have you lost your family, your home? Everything you knew burned to nothing while you ran like a coward?" "No," Caleb admitted. "I haven't, but I've done the burning. I've been the man who destroyed families, who turned homes to ash. So maybe I don't know your pain, but I know the other side of it. And I know it doesn't make either of us feel better." Ayana was silent for a long moment. Then she drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable. "I hate him," she whispered. "Rourke, I hate him so much it feels like it will consume me. Sometimes I think if I could just kill him, if I could watch him die, then maybe I could breathe again." "And maybe you're right," Caleb said. "Or maybe you'd kill him and find out the hate doesn't go anywhere. It just sits there, waiting for the next target. Is that what happened to you?" "Something like that." He thought about the men he'd killed in the ravine, the way their blood had looked on the rocks, how easy it had been, how little it had changed. "I spent years thinking if I could just get away from the army, from the killing, I'd find peace. Built that ranch, lived quiet, but peace doesn't come from running. It comes from, I don't know, something else." "What?" "If I knew that, I'd be a wiser man than I am." Despite everything, Ayana almost smiled. It was brief, fleeting, but Caleb caught it. A crack in the armor, human underneath all that rage and pain. "You are strange," she said again. "A white soldier who hates war, a killer who wants peace. I do not understand you." "That makes two of us." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind whisper through the pines. Above them, stars blazed across the black sky, so many and so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Caleb had forgotten how beautiful the night could be when you were far from civilization, from oil lamps and campfires and all the small lights people used to push back the darkness. "Tell me about the Sacred Valley," he said eventually. "What makes it sacred?" Ayana tilted her head back, looking at the stars. "It is a place where the earth speaks to the sky, where our ancestors walked and left their spirits behind. The valley is protected by ancient law. No outsider may enter, no blood may be spilled there. It is where we go to pray, to heal, to remember who we are. And the warriors who guard it? They are called the keepers, the strongest, the most skilled. They take an oath to defend the valley with their lives. They do not question, do not hesitate. If you enter without permission, they kill you. It is that simple. How do we get permission? We do not. I am the daughter of a chief, so they will hear me before they kill me. But you?" She shook her head. "You are a white soldier, the enemy. They will see the uniform you wore, the blood on your hands. They will not care that you helped me. They will only see what you represent. Then I'll have to make them see something else." "How?" Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He just knew that turning back wasn't an option, and neither was letting Rourke catch them. So forward was the only direction left, even if it meant walking into the hands of people who wanted him dead. "I'll figure it out," he said. "Always do." "Your confidence is foolish." "Probably, but it's kept me alive so far." Ayana studied him in the firelight, her expression unreadable. "Why are you really doing this, Caleb Ward? The truth this time." Not the easy answer. He thought about that, really thought about it. The truth was messy and complicated and probably wouldn't make sense to anyone else. But she'd asked, and she deserved honesty. "Because I'm tired of being ashamed," he said finally. "Tired of looking in the mirror and seeing someone I don't respect. When I found you bleeding on my doorstep, I had a choice. I could do what I'd always done, follow orders, keep my head down, let someone else handle the hard decisions. Or I could finally be the man I wanted to be instead of the man they made me." He met her eyes. "I chose. And I'm still choosing. Every day we keep running, every time I don't give up, I'm choosing to be better. Maybe it'll get me killed, but at least I'll die as someone I can live with." "That makes no sense." "I know. Told you it was messy." But Ayana nodded slowly, as if somewhere in his rambling she'd found something that resonated. "My father used to say that a person's spirit is measured not in their words, but in their choices, especially the hard ones." Smart man. He would have liked you or killed you, possibly both. Caleb laughed, surprised by the sound of it in the darkness. When was the last time he'd laughed? It felt rusty, unused, but good, like stretching a muscle that had been dormant too long. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll take first watch." "You need rest too." "I'll rest when we're safe." He picked up his rifle, checking the load out of habit. Wake me in a few hours. We'll trade off. Ayana lay down by the fire, pulling the blanket around herself. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened, evened out. Asleep. Trusting him enough to sleep. Caleb sat with his back against a pine tree, the rifle across his lap, and watched the darkness beyond the firelight. Somewhere out there, Rourke was hunting them. Somewhere ahead, the keepers waited to judge them. And somewhere between those two forces, he and Ayana walked a knife's edge between survival and death. But for the first time in years, Caleb felt like he was moving towards something instead of away from it. Like maybe, just maybe, there was a purpose to all this suffering. He watched the stars wheel slowly overhead and waited for dawn. They reached the valley's outskirts on the fourth day, just as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. Caleb saw the markers first, stacks of stones arranged in specific patterns, feathers tied to branches, symbols painted on rock faces, warnings, boundaries, lines not meant to be crossed. "We are close," Ayana said, her voice tight with tension. "The keepers will have seen us by now. They watch everything." "Then we wait for them to make contact?" "No, we go forward." To stop now would show fear, weakness. She touched the symbols on the nearest tree, her fingers gentle, reverent. "Follow me. Stay close. Do not reach for your weapon no matter what happens. If you do, they will kill you instantly." Comforting. "I am trying to keep you alive. Appreciate that." They moved forward through the pine forest, entering what felt like a different world. The air was different here, heavier, charged with something Caleb couldn't name. Ancient. The trees grew taller, older, their trunks thick as houses. Shafts of sunlight filtered down through the canopy, illuminating the forest floor in golden columns. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. They followed a deer trail that wound between massive boulders, descended into a creek bed where water ran crystal clear over smooth stones, then climbed again toward a ridge. Caleb's nerves were stretched tight, every sense alert. He kept expecting arrows to appear from the shadows, warriors to materialize from behind trees, but nothing moved except the wind in the branches. Then they crested the ridge, and the sacred valley opened before them. It stole Caleb's breath. The valley was maybe 2 miles across, bowl-shaped and ringed by steep mountains. A river ran through its center, fed by waterfalls cascading down the rock walls. The valley floor was covered in grass so green it hurt to look at, dotted with wildflowers that painted the landscape in every color imaginable. Ancient trees, oak and aspen and pine, stood like sentinels. And in the distance, against the far cliffs, Caleb could see structures. Not teepees or temporary camps, but permanent lodges built into the rock itself. "The old place," Ayana whispered, "where my ancestors lived before the white men came, before we were pushed onto reservations and hunted like animals. This is what we were." Caleb understood. This wasn't just a valley. It was a memory, a piece of a world that had existed before everything changed. "It's incredible," he said. "It is ours," Ayana replied, "and it is the last thing we have that they have not taken." They started down into the valley, and that's when the warriors appeared. They came from everywhere at once, from behind boulders, from the tree line, from the tall grass itself. 20 warriors, maybe more, all armed with rifles, bows, and spears. They moved in perfect silence, forming a circle that tightened like a noose. Within seconds, Caleb and Ayana were surrounded. "Do not move," Ayana said quietly. "Do not speak unless spoken to." One of the warriors stepped forward. He was older than the others, maybe 40, with gray threading through his long black hair. Scars marked his arms and chest. His eyes were hard as flint, and they fixed on Caleb with undisguised hatred. "Ayana," the warrior said in her language, "daughter of Neshoba, we heard about the massacre. We grieved." His gaze didn't leave Caleb. "Why do you bring this filth into our sacred place?" "He saved my life, Dakota," Ayana replied, also in her language. Caleb couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Defensive. Pleading. "He protected me when Rourke's men came. He killed his own people to keep me safe." "He is white," Dakota said flatly. "He is a soldier. His kind murdered your father, burned your village, and you bring him here, to the one place they have not yet defiled?" "He is not like them. They are all the same. Killers, liars, thieves who take and take until nothing remains. Dakota's hand moved to the knife at his belt. I should open his throat and let his blood water this ground. It would be justice. It would be murder, Ayanna shot back. And this place is sacred. You said so yourself. No blood may be spilled here. Then we will take him outside the valley and kill him there. No. The word rang out, absolute and unyielding. Every warrior turned to look at Ayanna, surprise on their faces. She stood straighter, and despite her wound, despite her exhaustion, she looked every inch a chief's daughter. I invoke the law of sanctuary, she said formally. I am of royal blood, daughter of a chief who died defending his people. By ancient right, I claim protection for this man. He is under my shield. To harm him is to harm me. Dakota's expression darkened. You would use that law? For him? I would. Have you lost your mind, girl? This is a white soldier. He saved my life. Ayanna's voice cracked with emotion. When I was bleeding in the wilderness, he took me in. When his own people came for me, he sent them away. When they returned, he fought them. He killed 3 men, Dakota. 3 soldiers who wore the same uniform he once wore. He gave up everything to protect me. His home, his safety, his future. And you want to repay that by cutting his throat? He is still white. And I am still alive because of him. She stepped forward, getting in Dakota's face despite the fact that he was twice her size. We talk of honor, of justice, of being better than the white men who hunt us. But if we kill him for the crime of his skin, how are we any different? How are we better? Silence fell over the valley. The warriors shifted, uncomfortable, glancing at each other. Caleb stood perfectly still, understanding that his life hung on this moment, on these words he couldn't understand. Finally, Dakota spoke. The law of sanctuary is sacred. If you invoke it, we must honor it. But the law also demands proof. He must demonstrate that he is worthy of protection, that he truly stands with us against his own kind. What proof do you require? Trial by combat. Dakota's smile was cold. Let him face our strongest warrior. If he wins, he earns the right to stay. If he loses, he dies. Either way, we will know the truth of his spirit. Ayanna turned to Caleb, speaking English now. They want you to fight, one of their warriors, to prove yourself. I figured. Caleb looked at the circle of hostile faces. Do I get a weapon? They will provide one. It will be a fair fight. Define fair. You will both have the same weapon. You will fight until one cannot continue. She hesitated. Caleb, their warriors are trained from childhood. They are killers, the best of the best. And you are exhausted, wounded, half-starved. If you accept this, you will probably die. And if I don't accept, they will kill you anyway. But it will be quick, merciful. Caleb looked at the valley spread out before him, beautiful and ancient and worth fighting for. He thought about the ranch burning, about the men he'd killed to protect Ayanna, about all the choices that had led him to this moment. Tell them I accept, he said. Ayanna's eyes widened. Caleb, tell them, she translated, and a murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Dakota nodded, something almost like respect flickering across his face. Tomorrow at dawn, he said in English, the words heavily accented but clear. You fight, you die, or you prove yourself. Until then, you are prisoner. 2 warriors stepped forward and took Caleb's weapons, his rifle, his pistol, the knife at his belt. They bound his hands in front of him, not cruelly, but firmly. Then they led him away from Ayanna, toward one of the structures carved into the cliff wall. Caleb, Ayanna called after him. He looked back, gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. See you tomorrow. Do not die. Wasn't planning on it. But as they locked him in a small stone room with only a narrow window for light, Caleb had to admit his plan was looking shakier by the minute. The night passed slowly. Caleb sat on the dirt floor back against the cool stone wall and tried not to think about tomorrow, about the fight he'd agreed to, the warrior he'd face, the very real possibility that he'd finally made a choice he couldn't survive. Instead, he thought about the valley, about how it represented everything the frontier had destroyed, beauty, permanence, peace, about how Ayanna's people had been pushed to this last refuge, this final sanctuary. about how Rourke wanted to take even that away. Footsteps outside the door. A key turning in the lock. The door swung open and Ayanna slipped inside, a bundle in her arms. "You should not be here," Caleb said. "They granted me permission to see you, as is my right under the law of sanctuary." She sat down beside him, setting the bundle between them. "I brought food, water, medicine for your arm." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She unwrapped the bundle, revealing dried meat, flatbread, and a clay jar of some kind of salve. "You are going to fight for your life tomorrow. You need strength." Caleb ate, suddenly realizing how hungry he was. The food was simple but good, and he forced himself to eat slowly to let his body absorb the nourishment. Ayanna watched him in silence, then opened the jar and began treating the graze on his arm. "Who will I be fighting?" Caleb asked. "His name is Kime. It means thunder." Her hands were gentle as she applied the salve. "He is the strongest of the keepers, the best warrior in the valley. He has never been defeated." "Wonderful." "I am sorry, Caleb. I should not have brought you here. I should have—" "Stop." He caught her hand, stilling it. "You did what you had to do. We both did. No apologies, no regrets. But if you die tomorrow, then I die fighting for something that matters." He released her hand. "That's more than a lot of men get." Ayanna was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes searching his face in the dim light. "You are not afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But fear's just another thing to carry, like the rifle, like the guilt, like everything else. You carry it or you put it down." "And which will you do tomorrow?" "Carry it into the fight, then put it down when it's over." She nodded slowly as if this made sense to her. "Kime will try to kill you. That is his way. He does not know mercy, does not understand surrender. To him, you are the enemy. All white men are the enemy. Can't say I blame him. You must fight with everything you have. Do not hold back. Do not show weakness. If you hesitate, if you try to show mercy, he will use it against you. He will kill you." "I understand. Do you?" She leaned closer, urgent. "When I said you must fight, I mean you must be willing to kill. Can you do that? Can you kill one of my people to save yourself?" Caleb thought about that, about all the killing he'd done, all the blood on his hands, about the promise he'd made to himself to be better, to find another way. But he also thought about Ayanna's face when she talked about her father, about the valley and what it represented, about the fact that dying here wouldn't prove anything except that he was too stubborn to stay alive. "If he gives me no choice," Caleb said quietly, "then yes, I can kill him. But I won't want to, and I'll carry that weight too." "Good." Ayanna finished bandaging his arm, then sat back. "There is something else you should know. About the fight. It will not be with rifles or pistols. Those are white man's weapons. You will fight with what the land provides." "Meaning?" "Meaning whatever you can find. Rocks, sticks, your bare hands. It is meant to test your spirit, not just your skill with weapons." "Fair enough." Caleb flexed his arm, testing the bandage. "Thanks for this. For the food, the medicine, for trying to keep me alive. I owe you my life. This is the least I can do." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," Ayanna said softly. "I do. And tomorrow, if you survive, I will tell you why." She stood to leave, but Caleb caught her hand again. "Ayanna, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. Meeting you, helping you, making this choice. I don't regret it. Even if it kills me, I don't regret it." She looked down at him, and in the moonlight filtering through the window, her face was beautiful and sad. "You are a fool, Caleb Ward. Yeah, I know. But perhaps a noble fool." She squeezed his hand once, then pulled away. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you will need every ounce of strength." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a hollow thud. The lock turned. Silence returned. Caleb lay down on the hard floor and stared at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as the moon crossed the sky. Tomorrow he would fight a man called Thunder. Tomorrow he would probably die. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt like his life meant something. He closed his eyes and dreamed of burning villages and sacred valleys and a woman with eyes like the night. Dawn came too soon. They brought Caleb out into the early morning light, The valley still wrapped in mist that clung to the river and softened the edges of everything. Warriors lined both sides of a cleared circle, maybe 30 paces across. In the center stood Dakota, and beside him the man Caleb would fight. Kimi was massive. Not just tall, but broad, built like a bear, with muscles that spoke of a lifetime of hard training. His chest was bare, marked with scars that told stories of battles survived. His face was impassive, eyes flat and dark as river stones. He looked at Caleb the way a butcher might look at a side of beef. "The rules are simple," Dakota announced in English, presumably for Caleb's benefit. "You fight until one cannot continue. You may use anything you find within the circle. You may not leave the circle. If you do, you forfeit your life. Are these terms understood?" "Yes," Caleb said. Keem said nothing, just stared. "Then let the trial begin." The warriors stepped back, widening the circle. Caleb scanned the ground. Rocks, a fallen branch, dirt. Not much to work with. Kem stood motionless, watching, waiting, patient. Caleb moved first, circling left, testing Kimi's reactions. The big warrior turned to track him but didn't advance. Just watched, like a predator waiting for the prey to tire itself out. Fine. Caleb could be patient too. He kept circling, using the time to study his opponent. Kime favored his left side slightly, an old injury maybe, or just natural preference. His hands were scarred across the knuckles. A brawler. Someone who'd spent years fighting close and dirty. "You cannot run forever, white man," Kim said. His English was better than Dakota's, only slightly accented. "Sooner or later you must face me." Just getting a feel for things. "You feel fear. I smell it on you." "Probably, but I'm still standing." Kimi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect? Curiosity? Hard to tell. Then he moved. He was fast, impossibly fast for a man his size. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his fist driving toward Caleb's face like a sledgehammer. Caleb barely dodged, felt the wind of the blow pass his cheek. He countered with a quick jab to Kim's ribs, connected. Might as well have punched a tree trunk for all the effect it had. Kimi grabbed for him and Caleb rolled away, coming up with the fallen branch in his hands. He swung it like a staff, forcing Kim back a step. The warrior smiled, the first expression Caleb had seen on his face, and it wasn't pleasant. "Good," Kim said. "You have some skill. This will not be boring." He came again, faster this time, and Caleb met him with the branch, wood cracked against flesh. Kimi grunted but didn't slow. He caught the branch, ripped it from Caleb's hands, snapped it over his knee like kindling. Then he drove forward, tackling Caleb to the ground. They grappled in the dirt, Kimi's weight crushing, his strength overwhelming. Caleb fought desperately, using every trick he'd learned in years of close combat. He got an elbow into Kimi's throat, making the big man choke and pull back. Used the space to scramble free, grabbed a rock, swung it at Kimi's head. Kimi caught his wrist, twisted. Pain exploded through Caleb's arm, and he dropped the rock. Then Kimi's fist crashed into his jaw, and the world went white. Caleb hit the ground hard, tasted blood. His vision swam. Through the haze, he saw Kim standing over him, impassive again, waiting, giving him the chance to get up or stay down. "Stay down, white man," Kimi said. "Accept defeat. Die with some dignity." Caleb spat blood. "Not my style." He forced himself up, legs shaking, head ringing. He could hear the warriors murmuring, could feel their eyes on him, could see Ayanna at the edge of the circle, her face pale with worry. He raised his fists. "Come on, then." Kimi's smile returned. "As you wish." They fought. Minutes blurred together in a chaos of pain and desperation. Caleb landed hits that would have dropped most men, but Kime absorbed them like stone absorbing rain. Meanwhile, every blow Kime landed felt like getting kicked by a horse. Caleb's ribs screamed. His jaw throbbed. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, making it hard to see. But he kept fighting, kept moving, kept refusing to stay down. "Why?" Kem asked as they circled each other again, both breathing hard now. "Why do you fight so hard for people who are not yours? For a woman who should hate you?" "Because," Caleb wiped blood from his eye. "Because someone has to." That is not an answer. "It's the only one I've got." Kemi studied him, and Caleb saw something shift in the warrior's expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. You are not like the others, the soldiers who came before. They begged, they cried, they bargained. You just fight. Different men, different ways. Yes, Kemi nodded slowly. Different men. Then he attacked again, but this time there was something different in the assault. Not trying to kill anymore. Trying to test. To push Caleb to his limits and see what he found there. Caleb met him head on, no longer trying to dodge or evade. Just fighting, trading blow for blow, accepting the pain, embracing it. This was what he knew. This was who he'd been before the ranch, before the peace, before the running. A warrior. A soldier. Someone who stood and fought when it mattered. They crashed together like thunder and lightning, and for a moment the world was just combat, just the raw honesty of two men testing each other's strength and will and spirit. Then Kemi's foot slipped on loose gravel, just for a second, just enough. Caleb saw the opening and took it. He drove his shoulder into Kemi's chest, used the big man's momentum against him, flipped him over his hip in a move he'd learned in basic training a lifetime ago. Kemi hit the ground hard. Caleb landed on top of him, and suddenly Caleb's hands were around the warrior's throat. He could do it. He could squeeze, could end this, could kill Kemi and prove himself to the watching warriors. But he didn't. He released Kemi's throat, rolled off him, and sat in the dirt breathing hard. The valley spun around him, blood dripped from his face. Everything hurt. Kemi lay there for a moment, stunned. Then he sat up, rubbing his throat, looking at Caleb with something like wonder. You had me, he said quietly. Why did you not finish it? Because... Caleb had to search for the words. Because I'm done killing people who don't need to die. You're not my enemy, Kim. Rourke is. And I'd rather save my strength for him. Silence fell over the circle. Every warrior stood frozen, watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Kemi got to his feet, extended his hand. Caleb stared at it, not quite believing. Then he took it, and Kemi hauled him upright. The big warrior studied Caleb's face, the blood and bruises, the exhaustion and pain. Then he turned to address the assembled warriors. This man has proven his spirit, Kemi announced in his language. He fought with honor, with courage. And when he had the chance to kill, he chose mercy. He is not like the others. He is not our enemy. He looked at Dakota. I say he has earned the right to stay, to shelter here, to be counted among us as a friend. Dakota's expression was unreadable. Then slowly, he nodded. So be it. By the laws of the trial, Caleb Ward has proven himself. He is under our protection now. A cheer went up from some of the warriors. Not all. Many still looked skeptical, hostile. But enough that Caleb felt the shift. From prisoner to... what? Guest? Ally? He wasn't sure, but he was alive. Ayanna pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears, and threw her arms around him. Caleb grunted in pain but didn't pull away. You fool, she whispered. You beautiful, stubborn fool. You could have died. Yeah, Caleb agreed, every word an effort. But I didn't. You let him live. You had the chance to kill, and you stopped. Told you, I'm trying to be better. She pulled back, looking at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. I am beginning to believe you. Kemi approached, and Ayanna stepped aside. The big warrior looked down at Caleb, and this time his face held something like respect. You fight well, white man, like a warrior, not a soldier. There is a difference. Thanks, Caleb managed. You don't pull your punches. If I did, you would not have proven yourself. Kemi's smile was brief but genuine. Rest now, heal, and when you are strong again, perhaps you will tell me your story. I would like to understand what makes a white man fight for his enemies. They're not my enemies anymore. No, Kemi agreed, glancing at Ayanna. I suppose they are not. He walked away, and the crowd began to disperse. Some warriors came forward to help Caleb toward the healing lodge, supporting him when his legs threatened to give out. Through the pain and exhaustion, Caleb felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Hope. Maybe they could survive this. Maybe there was a way through the violence to something better. Maybe, just maybe, the frontier could be more than just killing and hatred. The sun climbed higher over the sacred valley, And for the first time since he'd found Ayanna bleeding on his doorstep, Caleb let himself believe they might actually make it. But in the distance, beyond the mountains that sheltered the valley, Colonel Rourke was riding north with 20 armed men and murder in his heart. And the storm was coming. Caleb spent 3 days in the healing lodge, drifting in and out of consciousness while his body fought to repair itself. The women who tended him spoke little English, but their hands were gentle as they cleaned his wounds, applied poultices that smelled of sage and cedar, wrapped his cracked ribs. When fever came, and it always came after fights like that, they kept him cool with wet cloths, made him drink bitter teas that tasted like earth and rain. Ayanna visited every day, sitting beside his pallet in silence, or telling him stories about the valley, about her childhood, about a world that existed before the white men came and burned it all away. Sometimes Caleb understood her words. Sometimes he just listened to the rhythm of her voice and let it anchor him to consciousness. On the 4th day, he woke clear-headed, the fever broken, and found Keem sitting cross-legged beside him. "You live," the big warrior said. It wasn't a question. Apparently, Caleb's voice came out as a croak. His throat felt like sandpaper. "How long?" 4 days since the fight. "You are strong." Most men would still be fevered. Kimmy handed him a water skin. "Drink slowly." The water was cool and sweet, probably from the river that ran through the valley's heart. Caleb drank carefully, feeling his body remember how to function. Everything hurt, but it was the good kind of hurt, the healing kind. "Why are you here?" Caleb asked. "To talk. While you can still hear truth without pride getting in the way." Kemi's face was serious. "Rourke's men have been spotted. Scouts say they are camped 2 days south, maybe 30 soldiers now. More joined him." Caleb's stomach tightened. "How long before they find the valley?" "The valley is hidden, protected by the mountains and by ancient knowledge. But Rourke has trackers, men who know the wilderness. They will find the markers eventually, find the paths. When they do," Kemi's expression darkened. "We have 20 warriors, maybe 25 if we arm the younger men, against 30 soldiers with rifles. Not good odds." "No. Which is why Dakota argues we should leave. Abandon the valley, disappear deeper into the mountains where Rourke cannot follow." "And you disagree?" Kimmy smiled, grim and humorless. "This is our last sanctuary, our last piece of the world they have not stolen. If we run from here, where do we run to? There is nowhere left. So, yes, I disagree. I say we fight." Caleb pushed himself up to sitting, ignoring the protests from his ribs. "What does Ayanna say?" "She says it should be your decision." "Mine? I'm not one of you. I'm just—" "You are the man Rourke wants dead," Kimi interrupted. "You are the reason he hunts so hard. He could chase Ayanna forever and maybe never find her. But you? You killed his men. You defied him. You took what he considers his property. In his mind, you are the greater insult, the greater threat." The warrior's eyes were hard. "So yes, your decision. Do we stand and fight, or do we run and hope he loses interest?" Caleb thought about that ranch burning, about the look on Cain's face when Caleb had spared him, about the kind of man Rourke was, someone who didn't forgive, didn't forget, didn't stop until he'd crushed everyone who challenged his authority. "He won't lose interest," Caleb said quietly. "Men like Rourke don't know how. If you run, he'll follow. If you hide, he'll search. The only way this ends is if we end it. By killing him." "Yes," Kemi nodded slowly. "That is what I told Dakota. He calls it suicide. Says we should preserve what we can, live to fight another day." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "But I have fought all my life, Caleb Ward. I have watched my people pushed further and further into the margins. I have seen villages burned, children orphaned, the old and sick left to die in the snow. And I'm tired of running, tired of preserving scraps when we once had everything. So you want to fight? I want to die on my feet instead of my knees. If that is foolish, so be it. I am a fool." Kemi's smile returned, brief and fierce. "But I think maybe you are the same kind of fool. Am I wrong?" Caleb thought about the question, really thought about it. He could argue for running, for preserving life, for the smart tactical choice. But the truth was simpler and harder than that. The truth was that Kim was right. There was nowhere left to run. and running just meant dying tired instead of dying fighting. "No," Caleb said. "You're not wrong." "Good." Kimmy stood, offering his hand. "Then rest today, heal. Tomorrow we plan. The day after, we prepare. And when Rourke comes, we show him that some things cannot be taken, only defended." Caleb took the offered hand and let Keem pull him to his feet. His legs shook, but held. Everything hurt, but he could move. That would have to be enough. "One question," Caleb said as Keem turned to leave. "Why are you helping me? Really? I'm a white soldier. Everything you hate, so why?" Kimmy paused at the entrance to the lodge, his broad shoulders blocking the light. "Because when you had me beaten, when you could have killed me and proven yourself to everyone watching, you stopped. You chose mercy over victory, honor over survival." He looked back and his eyes were unreadable. "My people have a saying, you cannot know a man's spirit until you see him choose between what is easy and what is right. You chose right. That is rare, worth protecting." Then he was gone, ducking out into the sunlight, leaving Caleb alone with thoughts that wouldn't settle. The rest of the day passed in a haze of rest and recovery. Ayana brought him food, roasted venison, flatbread, berries so sweet they made his teeth ache. They ate together in comfortable silence, and when the food was gone, she helped him walk outside for the first time since the fight. The valley looked different in full daylight. More beautiful, more fragile. Caleb could see the lodges built into the cliff walls, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing by the river. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life that was becoming impossible on a frontier consumed by violence and greed. "This is what we fight for," Ayana said quietly, watching the children splash in the shallows. "Not just survival, but the right to live without fear, without being hunted." "I know." "Kimmy told you about Rourke's army?" "Yes." "And you still want to fight, even though it will probably kill you?" Caleb watched a little boy, maybe 6 years old, successfully catch a fish with his bare hands. The child's whoop of triumph echoed across the valley, pure and joyful. Other children ran to see, admiring his catch, and the boy stood a little straighter, proud of himself. "Yeah," Caleb said, "I still want to fight." "Why?" "You could run, slip away tonight, head west into territories Rourke would never search. Start over somewhere new. You do not owe us anything." "Maybe not, but I owe myself something." He turned to look at her. "I spent years running from who I was, from what I'd done. Built that ranch and pretended I could escape my past. But you can't escape the past, Ayana. You can only decide what you do about it. And I'm done running." She studied his face, her dark eyes searching. "You think fighting Rourke will redeem you? Will wash away all the blood on your hands?" "No, nothing washes that away. But maybe it'll balance the scales a little. Maybe it'll mean something." He looked back at the valley, at the children and the lodges, and the river that had flowed here since before men walked the earth. "Or maybe I just want to die protecting something beautiful instead of destroying it." Ayana was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "You are a strange man, Caleb Ward, but perhaps a good one, despite everything. Despite being white, despite being human. We are all capable of terrible things. The difference is in what we choose to do about it." She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "Come, there is someone I want you to meet." She led him across the valley to one of the larger lodges, this one decorated with symbols Caleb didn't recognize. An old woman sat outside, working on what looked like a ceremonial blanket. Her hair was white as snow, her face a map of wrinkles, but her hands were steady and her eyes sharp as a hawk's. "This is Grandmother Liwanu," Ayana said in English, then switched to her own language to introduce Caleb. The old woman looked him up and down, taking her time, missing nothing. Then she spoke, her voice surprisingly strong. "She says you have the eyes of a man who has seen too much death," Ayana translated, "but also the hands of someone who can still build. She wants to know which you will choose to be, destroyer or builder." "Tell her I'm trying to be both," Caleb said. "Destroy the things that hurt people, build things that help them." Ayana translated, and Grandmother Liwanu laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. She said something else, longer this time. her eyes never leaving Caleb's face. She says you speak like a dreamer, but the world needs dreamers. It has too many men who accept things as they are. Ayanna smiled. She also says your spirit is damaged but not broken, like a bowl with cracks, still useful, still beautiful, just different than it was. Tell her thank you. But Grandmother Liwanu was already speaking again, this time with urgency. She gestured toward the mountains, toward the south where Rourke's army waited. Her words came fast, intense. Ayanna's expression changed as she listened, growing troubled. She says a storm comes, not the white man's army, though that is coming too. A storm in the spirit world, a reckoning. She says the valley has been peaceful too long, and peace cannot last forever. All things must be tested, proven, or destroyed. Cheerful, Caleb muttered. She is not finished. Ayanna listened as the old woman continued. She says you are the catalyst, the spark that will either light a fire of renewal or burn everything to ash. Your choices matter more than you know, more than any of us know. No pressure then. Grandmother Liwanu reached out suddenly and grabbed Caleb's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. She pulled him closer, staring into his eyes with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. She spoke one more time, just a few words. Then she released him and went back to her blanket work as if nothing had happened. What did she say? Caleb asked. Ayanna hesitated. She said, do not mistake survival for victory, and do not mistake death for defeat. The true battle is not fought with weapons. What's that supposed to mean? I do not know. Grandmother speaks in riddles, but she is never wrong. Ayanna started walking back toward the healing lodge. Come, you need rest. Tomorrow, the real work begins. That night, Caleb lay on his pallet and stared at the ceiling, thinking about storms and battles and choices that mattered more than he understood. Outside, the valley settled into peaceful quiet, the river's song mixing with the whisper of wind through ancient trees. It felt safe here, protected. But safety was an illusion. Caleb knew that. Rourke was coming, and when he arrived, this place would become a battlefield. Blood would soak into the sacred ground. People would die. Maybe everyone would die. And somehow, Caleb was supposed to make choices that determined which. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Dakota called a council. Every warrior gathered in the central lodge, a circular structure big enough to hold them all. Caleb sat beside Cammy, aware of the hostile glances from some of the men who still saw him as an outsider, an enemy wearing a different face. Dakota stood in the center, his scarred face grave. Scouts confirm Rourke's position, 2 days south, camped near the Red Canyon. 32 soldiers, well armed. They are questioning anyone they find, threatening, torturing, looking for information about the sacred valley. Murmurs ran through the assembled warriors, fear, anger, determination, all mixed together in equal measure. They will find us, Dakota continued. It is only a matter of time. The question is what we do when they arrive. I propose we evacuate. Take the children, the elders, the women who cannot fight. Move deeper into the mountains. Hide until Rourke gives up or dies of old age. He will not give up, Keem said, standing. Men like Rourke do not know how. And what happens when other white men come? When armies come? Do we run forever? When does it end? When we are all dead if we are foolish enough to fight, Dakota shot back. 32 soldiers against 20 warriors. They have rifles, ammunition, military training. We have bows, spears, and pride. Pride does not stop bullets, Kimmy. Neither does running. It keeps us alive. The argument escalated, voices rising, other warriors joining in. Half wanted to fight, half wanted to flee. The lodge filled with shouts and accusations, old grievances bubbling to the surface. Caleb watched it unfold, understanding that this was about more than just Rourke. This was about years of pressure, of loss, of being pushed to the breaking point and not knowing which way to break. Finally, Ayanna stood. The shouting died down, men turning to look at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. She was young, barely more than a girl in some eyes, but she was also a chief's daughter. Her voice carried weight. You argue about fighting or running as if those are the only choices, she said clearly. But there is a third option. We trap them. Silence. Then Dakota spoke. Explain. The valley is surrounded by mountains, by narrow passes and steep canyons. There are places where 30 men would have to move in single file, where they would be exposed and vulnerable. We do not meet them in open battle. We use the land itself as a weapon. We draw them in, make them think they have found us, then close the trap. She looked around the circle. We do not fight their fight. We fight ours. Kimi was nodding. The old ways. The way our grandfathers fought before we learned to use rifles and try to match them weapon for weapon. Ambush tactics, Caleb added quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Classic guerrilla warfare. Use superior knowledge of terrain to offset inferior numbers and firepower. Hit them when they're vulnerable, fade away before they can respond. Whittle them down, break their morale. You have done this before? Dakota asked. Different context, different enemy, but yeah, I've done it. Caleb stood, moving to the center near Ayana. The valley has what, 3 main approaches? 4 if you count the North Pass. 3, Kimi confirmed. North, south, and the western ravine. The east is impassable cliffs. Then we watch all 3, see which way they come. When they commit, we hit them in the pass. Rocks from above, arrows from cover, whatever we can use to slow them down and make them bleed. We don't try to stop them completely, just make them pay for every yard. By the time they reach the valley proper, they're exhausted, diminished, demoralized. And then? Dakota's voice was skeptical, but interested. Then we finish it. On our terms. On our ground. Caleb looked at Ayana, then at Kime. But it requires patience, discipline. No heroic charges, no individual glory. We work as one unit, or we die as 30 individuals. The warriors muttered among themselves, considering. Finally, an older warrior Caleb didn't know spoke up. Why should we trust your tactics, white man? You who burned our villages, who hunted us for sport. Because I know how they think, Caleb said bluntly. I know how soldiers are trained, how they move, what mistakes they make. And because I've seen what happens when pride meets bullets. Pride loses. Every time. He met the older warrior's eyes. You want to die standing up? Fine. Noble. But I'd rather live standing up and kill the bastards who want me on my knees. A few warriors laughed at that, tension breaking slightly. The older warrior nodded slowly, something like approval in his expression. Dakota raised his hand for silence. This plan has merit, but it requires Rourke to come here, to the valley. What if he does not? What if he searches elsewhere? Ayana and Caleb exchanged glances. Then Ayana spoke. We make sure he comes here. We give him bait he cannot refuse. What bait? Me, she said simply. Rourke wants me, has wanted me since my father refused his offer. If he knows I am here, he will come, no matter what. No, Caleb said immediately. Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait. It is my choice. It's suicide. It is strategy. She turned to face him fully. You said it yourself. We fight on our terms or we die on theirs. This is our terms. I show myself, draw him in, lead him into the trap. Then we spring it. And if something goes wrong, if they catch you before, then you rescue me, or you avenge me. Either way, Rourke dies. Her voice was hard as stone. This is not about me, Caleb. This is about ending the cycle. About making sure he never hunts another woman, never burns another village. About justice. It's about revenge. Yes, that too. And I have earned it. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But looking at her face, at the determination and pain and absolute certainty there, he knew there was no other way. She was right. Rourke would come for her, and they could use that. Fine, he said quietly. But we do this smart, controlled. No unnecessary risks. Agreed. Dakota looked between them, then at the assembled warriors. We vote. All who support this plan, make it known. Hands went up. Not all of them, but most. Enough. Then it is decided. We prepare the valley for war. We watch the passes. And when Rourke comes, we teach him that some things cannot be taken by force. Dakota's scarred face was grim. May the spirits guide us. The council broke up, warriors dispersing to their tasks. Caleb found himself standing with Kame and Ayana, the three of them looking out across the valley that would soon become a killing ground. How long to prepare? Kame asked. 1 day, maybe 2, Caleb said. We need to scout the passes, find the best ambush points, stockpile rocks and ammunition, set up fallback positions, coordinate signals so everyone knows when to strike. I will organize the warriors, assign positions. And I will make sure Rourke knows where to find me, Ayana added. Caleb looked at her. How? Leave that to me. Just be ready when he comes. She walked away before he could argue, leaving Caleb alone with Kime. The big warrior clapped him on the shoulder, nearly staggering him. She is brave, like her father. She's going to get herself killed. Maybe. Or maybe she will kill the monster who destroyed her family. Either way, she faces her fate with courage. That is all any warrior can ask. Kemi's expression was thoughtful. You care for her. I see it. I barely know her. The heart does not need time. It only needs truth. Kemi smiled. Come. We have work to do. Time for feelings later, if we survive. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Caleb worked with warriors to scout the South Pass, the most likely approach. He found good positions, places where men with bows could rain down arrows while staying protected, places where rocks could be triggered to cascade down the narrow trail, places where a few determined fighters could hold off many for long enough to make a difference. By evening, his body was screaming at him to rest, his bruised ribs protesting every movement, but there was too much to do, too little time. He pushed through the pain, showing warriors how to create overlapping fields of fire, how to fall back in an organized retreat, how to make every second count when the shooting started. As the sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Caleb stood at the South Pass entrance and looked out across the wilderness. Somewhere out there, Rourke was planning his assault. Somewhere out there, death was riding north with murder in its eyes. Let it come, Caleb muttered to himself. We'll be ready. But as he walked back to the valley, he couldn't shake the feeling that no amount of preparation would be enough. That when Rourke finally arrived, the cost of victory would be measured in blood and ash and broken spirits. Grandmother Liwanu's words echoed in his mind. Do not mistake survival for victory. Do not mistake death for defeat. What the hell did that mean? He found Ayana sitting by the river, her feet in the water, staring at nothing. Without a word, he sat down beside her, and they watched the current flow past in the gathering darkness. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps us sharp, keeps us alive. Or it gets us killed. That too. She pulled her feet from the water, hugged her knees to her chest. I sent word to Rourke. Through channels he will trust. Told him where I am, what I am doing. Challenged him to come take what he thinks belongs to him. Ayana, it is done, Caleb. He will come. Tomorrow or the next day. And when he does, we end this. Or it ends us. Yes, that is always the risk. She looked at him, and in the twilight her eyes were dark pools. I want you to promise me something. If I fall, if Rourke captures me or kills me, I want you to run, get out of the valley, survive. No, Caleb E., I said no. We're in this together now. I don't run while you die. That's not who I am anymore. You are a fool. So you keep telling me. She laughed, soft and sad. Then she leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that as night claimed the valley. Tomorrow, or the next day, the killing would start. But tonight, there was just the river, the stars, and the fragile connection between two people who'd found something worth fighting for in a world determined to take it away. Morning came too fast, bringing with it the thunder of hoofbeats and the glint of rifles in the sun. Rourke had arrived. The warning came at dawn from a young scout named Matto, who'd been watching the southern approach. He ran into the valley with wild eyes and heaving breath, shouting that riders were coming, 30 or more, moving fast through the canyon. Caleb was checking positions with Keem when the alarm went up. They exchanged one look, then both sprinted toward the southern pass. Warriors materialized from the lodges, grabbing weapons, taking up assigned positions with the swift efficiency of men who drilled for this moment. Children and elders disappeared into the cliff dwellings, hidden behind false walls and secret passages that had protected their people for generations. By the time Caleb reached the overlook above the South Pass, the valley had transformed from a peaceful sanctuary into a fortress preparing for siege. He could see them now, a dark line of riders emerging from the tree line below. Even at this distance, he could make out the leader, a man who sat his horse like he owned the world, straight-backed and confident. Colonel Marcus Rourke, the monster who'd burned Ayanna's village, who'd hunted her across the frontier, who'd turned Caleb's life into a running battle for survival. They come straight up the main trail, Keem observed, crouched beside Caleb behind a boulder. Arrogant. They do not even scout ahead. They don't think they need to. Caleb watched the column advance, counting. 32 soldiers, just as the scouts had reported, all armed with rifles, all wearing the bastardized remnants of Union cavalry uniforms. Rourke thinks he's bringing overwhelming force against a scattered, demoralized enemy. He doesn't know what's waiting. Then we teach him. 20 warriors were hidden among the rocks above the pass, bows strung and ready. Another 5 waited in concealed positions along the trail itself, ready to strike from behind once the column committed. It was a good ambush, classic and effective. But Caleb's gut churned with anxiety because no plan survived contact with the enemy, and one mistake could turn this into a massacre. Below, Rourke's column entered the pass. The trail narrowed here, hemmed in by sheer rock walls on both sides. The soldiers bunched up, forced into a long line that stretched back down the canyon. Perfect. Vulnerable. Caleb raised his hand, ready to give the signal. But before he could, a voice rang out from below, clear and commanding. Hold! Rourke. The colonel had stopped his horse at the narrowest point of the pass, one hand raised. The column halted behind him. Caleb's heart sank as he watched Rourke scan the rocks above, that weathered face showing neither fear nor surprise, just cold calculation. I know you're up there, Rourke called out. His voice echoed off the stone walls. Hidden like cowards, like savages who don't have the courage to face me in open combat. Silence from the rocks. Keem glanced at Caleb questioningly, but Caleb shook his head. Wait. Let him talk. You think I don't know an ambush when I see one? Rourke continued. I've been fighting Indians and deserters for 20 years. I've walked into more traps than you've lived days, boy. He was looking directly at the boulder where Caleb hid, as if he could see through solid stone. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to send down the girl, Ayanna, daughter of that fool chief who thought he could defy me. And you're going to send down the traitor Caleb Ward. You do that, and the rest of you can live. I'll ride away. No more killing. Liar, Kimmy breathed. Obviously, Caleb agreed, but the words had an effect. He could feel the warriors around them shifting, uncertain. The offer was tempting, even if it was poison. Trade 2 lives for 30. Simple arithmetic. Ayanna's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stood on an outcropping above and to the left of Rourke's position, tall and defiant in her deerskin dress, her long black hair whipping in the wind. She looked like a spirit of the mountains themselves. You murdered my father, she called down. You burned my village. You slaughtered children who had never raised a hand against you. And you dare speak of honor, of letting people live? Rourke turned his horse to face her, and even from this distance, Caleb could see the smile that split his face. There you are, beautiful as ever. Did you miss me, girl? I have dreamed of your death every night since you destroyed my home. Have you? Rourke's voice took on a strange, almost gentle quality that was somehow more disturbing than his earlier commands. That's touching? Really? But you see, this isn't about your village. This isn't even about you, though you are a prize I intend to claim. This is about respect, about maintaining order on the frontier. When a man like me says he wants something, he gets it. When someone defies that, well, examples must be made. The only example here will be your corpse rotting in the sun. Rourke laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Bold words from a girl surrounded by savages and one washed-up deserter. Speaking of which, Ward, I know you're listening. Why don't you show yourself? Let's talk man to man. Caleb stayed hidden. Every instinct told him this was wrong, that Rourke was playing some game they didn't understand yet. No? Coward as well as traitor then. Rourke's voice hardened. I'll tell you what I told Cain before you spared his worthless life. I don't forget when people cross me. You killed 3 of my men. You stole my property. You made me look weak in front of my soldiers. Those are sins that demand payment. Your property? Ayana's voice shook with fury. I am not property. I am a human being, a daughter, a survivor. You do not own me. You never will. We'll see about that. Rourke gestured to his men. Bring her. Everything happened at once. Soldiers dismounted and started climbing toward Ayana's position, rifles ready. She turned to run, exactly as Caleb had known she would, exactly as they'd planned. The soldiers pursuing her moved into the kill zone. Caleb gave the signal. 20 bows released as one. Arrows hissed through the air like angry hornets, finding flesh and bone. Men screamed. Soldiers fell, clutching at shafts buried in chests and throats. The carefully planned ambush unfolded with brutal efficiency. But Rourke had planned too. Even as his men fell, even as chaos erupted around him, the colonel calmly raised his rifle and fired. Not at the warriors in the rocks, at the cliff face above them. The bullet struck an overhang, and for a moment nothing happened. Then Caleb heard a sound like thunder. The overhang collapsed, tons of rock cascading down in an avalanche that swept away 3 warriors and blocked half the trail. Rourke had spotted a weakness in the stone, had gambled everything on one perfect shot, and won. Fall back, Caleb shouted, but his voice was lost in the roar of falling rock. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding. Through the chaos, he saw Rourke's men rallying, taking cover, returning fire with military precision despite their losses. This wasn't a disorganized mob. This was a trained unit, and they'd walked into an ambush expecting it. Kimmy grabbed Caleb's shoulder. We must retreat, regroup. What about Ayana? She knows the plan. She runs. We cover. But even as Keem spoke, Caleb saw soldiers flanking through the rocks to the east, cutting off the retreat path. More men than there should be. Rourke had held back reserves, had anticipated their tactics, and now those reserves were moving to encircle them. They were trapped. New plan, Caleb said, mind racing. We don't retreat. We push forward. Hit them hard before they can set up a proper defense. That is suicide. So is staying here. Caleb grabbed his rifle, checked the load. Trust me. Kemi's scarred face split in a feral grin. You are insane. I like it. He turned to the nearby warriors, shouting commands in his language. Men nodded, gripped their weapons tighter, prepared to do something that contradicted every tactical principle but might be the only option left. They charged. Caleb led the way, sliding and scrambling down the rocky slope toward where Rourke's men were still recovering from the initial volley. He fired as he went, working the rifle's lever with practiced speed, dropping one soldier then another. Beside him, Keem roared like a bear, swinging a war club that crushed skulls and shattered bones. Other warriors followed, their war cries echoing off the canyon walls. They hit the soldiers like a storm. Close quarters combat erupted across the narrow pass. Rifle fire gave way to knives and clubs and desperate hand-to-hand fighting. Caleb shot a man at point-blank range, used the rifle butt to break another's jaw, drew his pistol and fired until it clicked empty. Blood sprayed. Men died. The world contracted to a red haze of survival instinct and violence. Through it all, Rourke sat on his horse, untouched, watching with the detached interest of a man observing an interesting science experiment. Magnificent, the colonel said, loud enough to carry over the screams. You fight well, Ward. Better than I expected from a deserter, but you're still going to lose. You know why? Caleb shot the soldier trying to bayonet him, then looked up at Rourke. Enlighten me. Because you care. You're fighting to protect these people, this valley, that girl. You've got something to lose. Me? Rourke's smile was arctic. I've got nothing but anger and time, and I'll spend both until everyone who defied me is dead. Including your own men? Expendable. All of them. Rourke drew his saber, the blade catching sunlight. But you? You're special. You remind me of someone. Before Caleb could respond, a soldier tackled him from the side. They went down in a tangle of limbs, grappling for advantage. The soldier was young, strong, desperate. He got his hands around Caleb's throat and squeezed. Black spots danced in Caleb's vision. He fumbled for his knife, found it, drove it up under the soldier's ribs. The hands around his throat went slack. Caleb shoved the body aside and struggled to his feet, gasping. Around him, the battle was turning. The initial shock of the charge had worked, had thrown Rourke's men into disarray, but now they were recovering, using their superior numbers and firepower to push back. Warriors were falling. Blood stained the sacred ground. "Retreat!" Kimi bellowed. "Back to the valley! Now!" The warriors broke contact, running for the valley entrance. Rourke's men pursued, firing as they went. Bullets whined past Caleb's head as he ran. One tugged at his sleeve, another kicked up dust at his feet. He didn't look back, just ran. They made it through the narrow throat of the pass and into the valley proper. Kamei immediately started organizing a defensive line, positioning warriors behind whatever cover they could find. Caleb joined him, reloading his weapons with shaking hands. "We lost 6, Kem reported grimly. "Maybe 7, and they still have 25 men at least. But now they're in the valley, on our ground." Caleb scanned the terrain, calculating angles and distances. "We can hold here, make them pay for every yard." "And Ayana?" Good question. Caleb looked around but didn't see her. She was supposed to have fallen back to the cliff dwellings, to safety. But knowing Ayana, she was probably doing something brave and stupid instead. A scream confirmed his suspicion. He turned and saw her on the far side of the valley, near the river. She wasn't alone. 4 soldiers had her surrounded, rifles trained on her chest, and walking toward her, saber still drawn, was Colonel Rourke. "No," Caleb breathed, then louder, desperate. "No!" He started running, but Keem caught his arm. "Wait! It is a trap!" "I don't care." She knew the risks. She chose this. "Let go of me. Caleb." Caleb drove his elbow into Keem's gut. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to break the grip. Then he was running again, sprinting across the valley floor toward where Rourke was closing in on Ayana like a wolf on wounded prey. Rifle fire erupted from behind him as the battle resumed. Warriors and soldiers trading shots, the crack of gunfire echoing off the mountains. But Caleb barely heard it. His entire world had narrowed to the scene unfolding by the river. Rourke reached Ayana, and to Caleb's surprise, the colonel sheathed his saber. Instead, he just stood there, looking at her with an expression that was almost sad. "You could have avoided all this," Rourke said quietly. "Your father could have accepted my offer, given you to me willingly. We could have built something together, a new order on the frontier. Instead, he chose pride, chose to defy me. And look what it cost him. He chose honor over slavery," Ayana spat. "Something you know nothing about." "Honor?" Rourke's laugh was bitter. "Honor is a lie weak men tell themselves to feel better about losing. I learned that lesson long ago, from my own daughter, in fact." Ayana's expression shifted, confusion breaking through the hatred. "Your daughter?" Caleb had reached them now, pistol drawn, breathing hard. The 4 soldiers turned their rifles on him but didn't fire, waiting for Rourke's command. "Ward," Rourke greeted him almost pleasantly. "Good of you to join us. Now we can have that conversation I mentioned." "Let her go," Caleb said. "Your fight is with me." "My fight is with everyone who defies the natural order, who thinks they can build something soft and weak in a hard world." Rourke turned back to Ayana. "You want to know why I do this? Why I hunt you so relentlessly? It's not about wanting you, girl. It's about what you represent. My daughter Elizabeth represented the same thing once. Gentleness, compassion, mercy. All the qualities that get people killed on the frontier." "What happened to her?" Ayana asked, and Caleb could hear the strategic calculation in her voice. Keep him talking. Buy time. "She fell in love with a soldier, one of my own lieutenants. A good man, I thought, strong, capable. But then the war ended and he started talking about leaving, about building a ranch somewhere peaceful, about raising children who'd never know violence." Rourke's voice went flat. "He made her soft, made her question everything I'd taught her about strength and survival. So I gave her a choice. Him or me. The weak dream of peace or the strong reality of power." "She chose him," Caleb said, pieces clicking into place, a terrible understanding dawning. "She chose him. And when I told her she was dead to me, when I said she was no longer my daughter, she smiled. Actually smiled. Said she'd rather be his wife than my child. Rourke's hand drifted to his saber hilt. That smile haunted me for months, kept me awake at night, made me question everything. So I went to find her. Went to that ranch they'd built in Montana Territory. Meant to talk to her, to convince her to come home. But you didn't talk, Ayanna said softly. I found them working together, building a fence, laughing. She looked happy, happier than I'd ever seen her, and I realized she didn't need me anymore, didn't want my strength, my protection, my vision of how the world should be. She'd chosen weakness over power, love over survival. Rourke's voice cracked, so I made sure she couldn't choose wrong ever again. Horror crawled up Caleb's spine. You killed her, your own daughter. I freed her from the prison of her choices, and then I killed him too, the man who'd corrupted her, made it look like raiders, like savages had done it. Rourke looked at Caleb with eyes that held no sanity, no humanity. The lieutenant's name was Ward, Thomas Ward. He was your brother, Caleb. Did you know that? The world stopped. Caleb's mind rejected the words, couldn't process them. His brother Thomas, who'd left the army after the war, who'd written letters about finding peace, about meeting a woman, about building something good, who'd stopped writing 3 years ago, who Caleb had assumed just wanted to forget his family, his past, everything. Thomas, who'd been murdered by the father of the woman he loved. You're lying, Caleb whispered. Am I? Thomas Ward, formerly Lieutenant Ward of the 3rd Cavalry. Brown hair, scar on his left forearm from a saber duel during training. Wrote poetry, terrible poetry, but Elizabeth loved it. Used to quote philosophers like they meant something. Rourke's smile was a corpse's smile. He died begging me not to hurt her. Said he'd do anything if I just let Elizabeth live. But I killed her first. Made him watch. Then I took my time with him. Rage exploded through Caleb like a lightning strike. He raised his pistol, aiming at Rourke's head, finger tightening on the trigger, and stopped. Because Rourke's men had their rifles trained on Ayanna now. 4 barrels pressed against her from 4 directions. If Caleb fired, they'd fire. Ayanna would die. There it is, Rourke said softly. The moment of choice. Kill me and she dies. Let me live, and maybe you both walk away. What's it going to be, Ward? Vengeance or mercy? Strength or weakness? Caleb's hand shook. The pistol felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He could do it. Could pull the trigger, end this monster, avenge his brother and Ayanna's father and everyone Rourke had destroyed. But the cost would be Ayanna's life. Thomas's voice echoed in his memory, a letter from years ago. I'm learning that real strength isn't about how hard you can hit, Cal. It's about what you choose not to hit, what you choose to protect instead of destroy. Caleb lowered the pistol. Smart choice, Rourke said. Now drop it! The weapon fell from Caleb's fingers, landing in the grass with a soft thud. Rourke nodded to his men. They grabbed Caleb, forcing him to his knees. Other soldiers appeared from the rocks, herding the remaining warriors toward the center of the valley at gunpoint. Kime fought until a rifle butt to the head dropped him. Within minutes, the entire resistance had collapsed. Rourke had won. The colonel walked slowly toward where Caleb knelt, saber once again drawn. The blade gleamed in the afternoon sun, sharp and hungry. I want you to understand something before you die, Rourke said conversationally. This isn't about you specifically, or your brother, or even this valley. This is about maintaining the order that makes civilization possible. Someone has to be strong. Someone has to make the hard choices. If I let you defy me and live, others will try, and then everything falls apart. You're insane, Caleb said flatly. Perhaps, but I'm also victorious. And in the end, that's what matters. Rourke raised the saber. Any last words? Caleb looked past him to where Ayanna stood surrounded by soldiers. Their eyes met across the space. She mouthed something. He couldn't hear it, but he could read her lips. I'm sorry. Then she moved. She'd kept one hand hidden in the folds of her dress the whole time, and now that hand emerged holding the knife Caleb had given back to her after the fight with Keem. She drove it into the throat of the nearest soldier before anyone could react, ripped it free in a spray of blood, and threw herself backward into the river. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fired at the water where she'd disappeared. Rourke spun, shouting orders, momentarily distracted. Caleb didn't waste the opportunity. He surged up from his knees, driving his shoulder into the gut of the soldier holding him. The man went down. Caleb grabbed his rifle, spun, and fired point blank into the second soldier's chest. Around the valley, warriors who'd been forced to surrender saw their chance and erupted into action. The battle reignited in a heartbeat. But Caleb only had eyes for Rourke. The colonel turned back, saber raised, that terrible smile returning. Finally, I was hoping you'd have some fight left. They came together in a clash of steel and fury. Rourke was skilled, faster than a man his age should be, every movement precise and economical. Caleb fought with the desperation of someone who'd lost everything and had nothing left but the need to make it mean something. The saber struck sparks off the rifle barrel as Caleb parried. He countered with the butt stroke, missed, barely dodged Rourke's riposte. They circled each other, the battle raging around them forgotten. "You're good," Rourke acknowledged. "Thomas was good too. You fight the same way, all heart, no sense." "Shut up." He screamed at the end, called out for Elizabeth, for his mother. For you, actually. Kept saying Cal will make this right. But you didn't, did you? You didn't even know he was dead. Caleb roared and charged. Rourke sidestepped, the saber flashing out to open a line across Caleb's ribs. Pain flared hot and sharp. Caleb stumbled but didn't fall. He reversed the rifle, swinging it like a club, connected with Rourke's shoulder. The colonel grunted, backed up a step. "Better," Rourke said. "Use that rage. Let it consume you. Become what I am, what Thomas could never be. A killer. I'm nothing like you. We'll see." They fought across the valley floor, through the screaming chaos of the larger battle, two men locked in a private war that transcended everything around them. Caleb's world narrowed to Rourke's blade, to anticipating the next strike, to finding openings that might not exist. He was losing. He knew it. Rourke was better, fresher, uninjured. The cut on Caleb's ribs bled freely, making him weak and slow. His exhausted body was reaching its limit. But then he saw her. Ayanna emerged from the river behind Rourke, soaking wet, knife still in hand. She moved like a ghost, silent and deadly. The soldiers were too busy fighting to notice her. Only Caleb saw. And Rourke, reading something in Caleb's expression, started to turn. Too late. Ayanna drove the knife between his shoulder blades, buried it to the hilt. Rourke's eyes went wide. The saber fell from his fingers. He tried to speak, but only blood came out, dark and arterial. He fell to his knees, then onto his face, and moved no more. Colonel Marcus Rourke was dead. The moment Rourke's body hit the ground, something shifted in the air. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader dead, faltered. Some dropped their weapons immediately, hands raised in surrender. Others tried to run, only to be cut down by warriors who'd lost too much to show mercy now. A few fought on with desperate fury, knowing they'd committed too many atrocities to expect quarter, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Within minutes, the battle was over. Caleb stood swaying, blood running down his side from the saber wound, staring at Rourke's corpse. He felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no closure. Just a vast emptiness where rage had been burning moments before. Ayanna touched his arm, gentle. "Caleb." He turned to her. She was soaked from the river, shivering despite the warm afternoon sun, the knife still gripped in her white-knuckled hand. Her eyes were wide and lost, like she couldn't quite believe what she'd done. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Yeah." His voice came out rough, raw. "It's over." She dropped the knife and collapsed against him, her whole body shaking with sobs that had been building since her village burned. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and held her while she cried. Around them, warriors moved through the battlefield, checking the wounded, dispatching the dying, beginning the grim work that came after violence. Kim appeared, blood streaming from the gash on his head where the rifle butt had struck him. He looked at Rourke's body, then at Caleb and Ayanna, and nodded once. A warrior's acknowledgement of a battle won, a debt paid. "How many did we lose?" Caleb asked. 11 warriors dead, 5 wounded, 2 seriously. Kim's voice was heavy, and 4 elders who could not escape fast enough when the fighting reached the lodges. 15 of our people gone. 15 lives, 15 futures erased. Caleb felt the weight of those deaths settle on his shoulders alongside all the others he carried. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would honor their sacrifice, but words felt inadequate. They died defending their home, he said finally, fighting for something that mattered. That counts for something. Does it? Kim looked around at the blood-stained valley, at the bodies scattered like broken dolls. We won. We killed the monster, but the price… He shook his head. I am not sure victory feels the way I thought it would. It never does, Caleb said quietly. But you're alive. The valley survived. The children are safe. That's what matters. Kemi was quiet for a moment, then gripped Caleb's shoulder. You fought well, white man, like one of us. I am proud to call you brother. The feeling's mutual. The big warrior managed a tired smile, then moved off to help organize the aftermath. Ayana pulled back from Caleb, wiping her eyes. I killed him, she said, and he couldn't tell if it was a statement or a question. I drove the knife into his back and I felt it sink in, and I am glad. Is that wrong? Should I feel shame? No. You did what had to be done. Nothing shameful in that. But I'm not sad. I thought I would feel different. Thought killing him would heal something broken inside me. But I just feel empty. Caleb understood that emptiness. He'd felt it after every battle, every moment of violence that was supposed to mean something but just left hollowness in its wake. Revenge doesn't heal, he said. It just ends things. The healing comes later. If we're lucky. Are we? Lucky? He looked around at the valley, at the warriors tending their wounded, at the children emerging cautiously from the cliff dwellings, at the sun still shining on mountains that had witnessed countless such battles and would witness countless more. We're alive. That's luckier than most. Dakota approached, his scarred face grave. He stopped in front of Caleb, studying him with those hard flint eyes that had seen too much suffering to easily trust. Then he spoke in his language, the words formal and careful. Ayana translated. He says you have proven yourself beyond doubt. You fought with courage, protected our people, killed the enemy who threatened us. He says the warriors have discussed it and decided to offer you a place among us. If you wish it, you may stay in the valley, become one of the keepers. Live as we live. Caleb looked at Dakota, at the offer being extended. A home, a people, a purpose. Everything he'd been searching for since he walked away from the army. It was tempting, more than tempting, but something held him back. Tell him I'm honored, Caleb said. More honored than he knows. But I need to ask something first. Those soldiers who surrendered, what will happen to them? Ayana translated the question. Dakota's expression hardened. He replied in sharp, clipped tones. He says they will be executed, Ayana said quietly. They are Rourke's men. They participated in massacres. They hunted us. They do not deserve mercy. How many survived? 8. Maybe 9. 8 men, their hands bound, kneeling in the grass under guard. Caleb walked over to them, ignoring Dakota's protest. The prisoners looked up at him with varying expressions: fear, defiance, resignation. Most were young, barely out of their teens. Kids who'd probably joined Rourke for adventure or money, or because they didn't know what else to do with their lives. Which of you were at Ayana's village? Caleb asked. The massacre. Which of you were there? Silence. Then one man, older than the others, spit in the dirt. We all were. And I'd do it again. Savages needed teaching a lesson. Caleb shot him. 1 bullet. Center mass. The man fell backward, surprise frozen on his face. The other prisoners flinched, expecting to die next. But Caleb lowered the pistol and looked at the remaining 7. Anyone else feel that way? Head shakes. Desperate, terrified head shakes. You boys know what you've done, Caleb continued. Know the blood on your hands. Some of you probably joined Rourke thinking it was adventure. Some because you needed money. Some because you liked the power. Doesn't matter now. What matters is what you do next. He gestured to the valley, to the watching warriors. These people have every right to kill you. You participated in atrocities against them, against innocents. You earned execution. Please, one of the younger ones choked out. Please, I didn't want to. Rourke made us. He said if we didn't follow orders, he'd… I know what Rourke was. I know how men like him operate, and I know you're just boys who made terrible choices. Caleb looked at Dakota, then at Kim, then at Ayanna. But I also know that executing prisoners in cold blood makes us just like him, makes this whole thing meaningless. Dakota said something sharp in his language. Ayanna translated. He says you are weak, that mercy to enemies is stupidity, that these men will tell others about the valley, bring more soldiers. Maybe. Or maybe we send a different message. Caleb turned to address the assembled warriors, raising his voice so everyone could hear. You want the white world to see you as savages? As monsters who slaughter anyone who crosses them? Fine, execute these boys. But know that every soldier in the territory will hear about it, and they'll come. Not with 30 men, but with 300, 3,000. They'll burn this valley to bedrock and salt the earth after. Murmurs ran through the watching warriors, some angry, some thoughtful. But if we let them go, Caleb continued, if we send them back with the message that we defended ourselves, killed those who gave us no choice, but showed mercy to those who surrendered, that's a different story. That's the story of people defending their home, not savages, not monsters, people. Well, they will not care, Dakota said in heavily accented English. To white men, we are animals, always. Some, yeah, men like Rourke, but not all. I'm white, I'm here, and I'm telling you there are others like me, people who are sick of the killing, who want something different, something better. Caleb met Dakota's eyes. You can kill these boys if you want. I won't stop you. It's your right, your valley, your choice. But I'm asking, as someone who's fought beside you, bled with you, give them a chance to be better than what Rourke made them. Silence fell over the valley. Caleb could feel the weight of every eye on him, judging, weighing, deciding. He'd overstepped. He knew it. He was an outsider asking them to show mercy to the very people who'd tried to destroy them. It was asking too much. Then Keem spoke, his deep voice carrying authority. He said something in the language, gesturing to Caleb, to the prisoners, to the bodies scattered across the battlefield. Caleb couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Reasonable, considered, advocating. Other warriors joined in, debating heatedly. Dakota argued back, his scarred face fierce. But slowly, gradually, Caleb saw the tide turning. Not all the warriors agreed. Some still looked murderously at the prisoners. But enough were swayed. Finally, Dakota raised his hand for silence. He looked at Caleb for a long moment, some internal struggle playing out behind those hard eyes. Then he spoke. Ayanna translated, her voice surprised. He says the warriors have voted. 7 prisoners will be released. They will be given 1 day's food and water. They will be escorted to the southern boundary and told never to return. If they come back, they die. No mercy. No second chance. Relief flooded through Caleb so intensely his knees almost buckled. Thank you. Do not thank me, Dakota said in English. I think this is a mistake. Think you are too soft. But Kime speaks for you, says you earned right to ask this. So I honor his words, even though I disagree. That's all I can ask. Dakota nodded curtly, then turned to organize the prisoner release. The 7 young soldiers were pulled to their feet, still bound, still terrified. As they were led away, one of them, a boy who couldn't have been more than 17, looked back at Caleb with something like wonder. Why? The boy asked. Why spare us? Because someone spared me once, Caleb said, thinking of the ranch, of the choice to help Ayanna, of all the moments where he could have chosen differently. Figured I should pass it along. The boy nodded slowly, not quite understanding but accepting it. Then he was gone, herded south with the others toward whatever future awaited them. Ayanna moved to stand beside Caleb. That was foolish. Probably. Dakota is right. They may tell others about this place. Bring more enemies. Maybe. Or maybe they'll tell a different story, about the day savages showed them more mercy than civilized men ever did. He looked at her. Worth the risk, I think. She shook her head, but she was smiling. You are impossible, stubborn, idealistic beyond reason. Yep. I'm glad you are here. Before Caleb could respond, Kime called out that the wounded needed attention. The moment passed as they moved to help, falling into the grim routine of battlefield medicine. Caleb worked beside the tribal healers, using what skills he remembered from army field hospitals. Binding wounds, setting broken bones, making the dying comfortable when there was nothing else to be done. Hours passed in a blur of blood and pain and exhaustion. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, every wounded warrior had been tended, every body prepared for burial, every weapon cleaned and stored. The valley looked like a battlefield. The grass was trampled and blood-soaked. Scorch marks from rifle fire blackened the rocks. The river ran pink where it passed the killing grounds. But it was still standing, still sacred, still theirs. That night they burned Rourke's body along with his dead soldiers, sending their spirits wherever they were bound. The warriors who'd fallen defending the valley were given full honors, songs, prayers, ceremonial burials in the cliff walls where their ancestors rested. Caleb stood with Ayanna during the ceremonies, understanding maybe one word in 10, but feeling the weight of every syllable. They died as warriors, Ayanna said quietly as the sun finally disappeared and stars began emerging, fighting for home and family. My father would have been proud to die alongside them. He'd be proud of you too, for surviving, for fighting back, for being strong enough to choose mercy, even when revenge was easier. I did not choose mercy. You did. You didn't argue against it. Could have. Could have demanded those prisoners die, but you didn't. She was quiet for a moment, watching the ceremony. When I drove the knife into Rourke's back, when I felt him die, I thought I would feel satisfied, triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired, like I had carried a great weight for so long I forgot it was there, and now it was gone, and I did not know what to do without it. She looked at him. Does that make sense? More than you know. What do we do now? The battle is over. The enemy is dead. But we are still here, still alive. What comes next? It was the question Caleb had been avoiding. What did come next? Dakota had offered him a place among the warriors. He could stay in the valley, learn their ways, live out his days protecting this sacred ground. It was more than he deserved, more than he'd hoped for. But there was also the wider world, the frontier that still needed people willing to stand between the strong and the weak, other Rourkes waiting to rise, other villages waiting to burn. He'd spent years running from that fight, but maybe running wasn't the answer. I don't know, he admitted, but I think we figure it out together, if you want. Ayanna smiled, and in the firelight she looked impossibly young and impossibly old all at once. Yes, together, I would like that. The ceremonies continued into the night. Caleb and Ayanna sat apart from the main gathering, watching from a distance, and somewhere in those quiet hours a decision crystallized in Caleb's mind. He found Dakota after the ceremonies concluded, warriors dispersing to finally rest. The scarred leader sat alone near the river, cleaning his weapons with methodical care. Can we talk? Caleb asked. Dakota gestured to the ground beside him. Caleb sat, searching for the right words. I want to thank you, Caleb began, for letting me fight beside you, for trusting me when you had every reason not to, for showing me what real courage looks like. You earned your place here, proved yourself in combat, chose honor over vengeance. The warriors respect you. I know, and that means more than I can say. Caleb took a breath. But I can't stay. Dakota's hand stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. Why not? Because what happened here will spread. The story will get out. How Rourke came to the Sacred Valley and died. How his army was defeated. Some people will hear that and stay away, but others? Caleb shook his head. Others will see it as a challenge, an insult. And they'll come. Not with 30 men, with 300. And no amount of ambush tactics or brave warriors will stop that. So we prepare. We fortify. You disappear, Caleb interrupted gently. You take the children and elders deeper into the mountains. You scatter into groups too small to find, too mobile to catch. You preserve your people and your ways, but you don't try to hold territory. Because territory can be taken. People can't. Not if they refuse to stand still. Dakota's jaw tightened. You ask us to abandon the valley, our last sacred place. I'm asking you to survive. The valley will still be here. These mountains aren't going anywhere. But your people, they're what's truly sacred, not the ground, the ones who walk on it. And what will you do while we scatter like rabbits? I'm going to go out there, Caleb gestured vaguely toward the frontier beyond the mountains. And I'm going to tell a different story about what happened here. About warriors who defended their home with courage. About people who showed mercy when they could have chosen vengeance. About a white soldier who fought beside them because it was right. No one will listen. Some will. Not many, but some. And maybe those some will tell others. And maybe eventually enough people will hear a different story than the one men like Rourke have been telling. Maybe we can change what the frontier becomes. Dakota studied him for a long moment. You believe this? Truly? That words and stories can change the world? I believe they can change people. And people change the world. Caleb met his eyes. I can't undo what's been done. Can't bring back the villages that burned or the families that were destroyed. But I can try to make sure it happens less. Make sure the next generation inherits something better than endless war. That is a foolish dream. Yeah, but it's my foolish dream, and I'm tired of living without one. Dakota was silent for so long Caleb thought the conversation was over. Then the older warrior sighed, a sound that carried the weight of too many battles and too many losses. You are a strange man, Caleb Ward, but perhaps the frontier needs strange men. Men who dream when others have given up dreaming. He extended his hand. Go then. Tell your stories. Change your people. But know that you will always have a home here. Always have brothers among us. If you need sanctuary, you have earned it. Caleb took the offered hand, gripping it firmly. Thank you. For everything. Thank Kamei. He argued hardest for you, and thank the girl. She saw something in you worth saving. I am still not certain what, but she was right to see it. They sat together in comfortable silence after that, watching the river flow past, two warriors from different worlds who'd found common ground in the simple act of defending something worth defending. The next morning, Caleb prepared to leave. He packed light, just what he could carry on foot. The valley had no horses to spare, and he wouldn't have taken one anyway. They needed every resource for the difficult times ahead. Kemi found him as he was finishing. The big warrior carried something wrapped in leather. A gift, Kemi said, handing it over. For the road. Caleb unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautifully crafted knife, the blade made from what looked like meteorite iron, the handle carved from elk antler. Symbols he didn't recognize decorated both blade and handle. It is a warrior's knife, Keem explained, made by our greatest craftsmen, given only to those who have proven themselves in battle and in spirit. It marks you as one of us, as a brother. Caleb's throat tightened. Kame, I can't accept. You must. It is decided. You are a keeper now, whether you stay or go. This knife proves it. Show it to any of our people anywhere on the frontier, and they will know you, will help you, will trust you. Kimi's scarred face split in a smile. Try not to lose it. I won't, I swear. They clasped arms in the warrior's grip, forearm to forearm, and Caleb felt the strength in Kimi's grasp. The acceptance. The brotherhood that transcended culture and history, and all the things that should have made them enemies. Where will you go? Kimi asked. East first, to Montana Territory. There's something I need to do there. Your brother's grave? Yeah, need to pay my respects. Tell him I finally understand what he was trying to build. Caleb secured the knife to his belt. After that, wherever I'm needed. Wherever I can do some good. You will do good, I am certain of it. Kim stepped back. Travel safely, brother, and return when you can. There will always be a place at our fire for you. Ayana was waiting at the valley's southern entrance, the same place where they'd stood together watching Rourke's army approach. She looked different now, stronger somehow, despite the grief that still shadowed her eyes, like she'd shed an old skin and was still figuring out what she was underneath. So you are leaving, she said. Not a question. Yeah, but you already knew that. I did. Does not mean I have to like it. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, so much to say and no words adequate to the task. Come with me, Caleb said suddenly. We could travel together, see what's out there, help people who need helping. I cannot. My place is here, with my people. They need someone who remembers what we lost, who can teach the children about their heritage. She smiled sadly. But I am glad you asked. You're sure? No, but I am certain. There is a difference. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bruised jaw. You gave me my life back, Caleb Ward. When I was bleeding in the wilderness, ready to die, you showed me there was still something worth fighting for. Not just revenge, not just survival, but the possibility of something better. You showed me the same thing. Then we are even, both saved, both changed. She pulled her hand back. Go and tell your stories. Change the frontier. But do not forget us. Do not forget what we fought for here. Never. She kissed him then, brief and fierce, a goodbye that held all the things they couldn't say. When she pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. If you ever need shelter, she said, if the world becomes too much and you need to remember what you are fighting for, come back. The valley will be here. I will be here. I'll remember. He turned to go, but she caught his arm. Caleb, one more thing. Grandmother Luwanu asked me to give you a message. She said to tell you that the bowl with cracks is stronger for being broken and repaired, that the cracks let the light through, that you should not be ashamed of them. Tell her thank you, and tell her I'll try to remember. Then he was walking away down the southern trail that led out of the valley and into the wider world. He didn't look back. If he looked back, he might not leave, and leaving was necessary. The valley needed to be a memory, a sanctuary he could return to in his mind when the darkness got too heavy. Not a prison. He walked for 3 days, heading east toward Montana territory, toward a small ranch where his brother had built something good and died protecting it. The journey gave him time to think, to process everything that had happened, to figure out what came next. He found the ranch exactly where he remembered from Thomas's letters. It was abandoned now, reclaimed by weeds and weather, the fence rotting and the cabin roof caved in. But Caleb could see what it had been, what Thomas and Elizabeth had tried to build. A life, a future, a small piece of peace on a violent frontier. He buried them properly, finding their remains where Rourke had left them. He worked for 2 days with borrowed tools from a neighboring ranch, digging graves deep enough to keep them safe. He marked them with stones and said words he hoped they'd appreciate, even though he'd never been good with prayer or poetry. You were right, Tom, he said to the freshly turned earth, about all of it, about there being something better than the killing, about love being stronger than hate, about building instead of destroying. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. Sorry I wasn't here when you needed me, but I'm here now, and I'm going to finish what you started. I'm going to tell people what you died for, what she died for. I'm going to make it mean something. The wind whispered through the grass, and Caleb chose to believe it was his brother's voice telling him it was okay, that he understood, that he was proud. He left the ranch and headed to the nearest town, a rough collection of buildings called Timber Creek that served miners and ranchers scattered across the territory. He walked into the saloon, ordered whiskey he didn't drink, and waited until the room was full. Then he stood up and told his story. He told them about Ayanna and her massacred village, about Rourke's tyranny and madness, about warriors who'd defended their home with courage, about the choice between revenge and mercy, about his brother and the woman he loved, and the price they'd paid for dreaming of something better. Some people listened. Some walked out. Some called him a liar, or worse. But a few, a precious few, heard him, really heard him. And when he finished, those few came up to him with questions, with their own stories of loss and grief and the slow realization that the frontier didn't have to be a charnel house. One was a newspaper editor named Sullivan who'd seen too many atrocities and was looking for different stories to tell. Another was a former soldier like Caleb who'd deserted and was trying to figure out how to live with himself. A third was a school teacher who wanted to educate children in something other than hatred and fear. What you're talking about, Sullivan said, his fingers ink-stained and his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. It won't be easy. Most people don't want to hear it. They're comfortable with the way things are, with the simple story of civilization versus savagery. I know, Caleb said, but the simple story is a lie, and lies only work when nobody's willing to tell the truth. You willing to tell it, even when it makes you unpopular, even when it puts a target on your back? Caleb thought about the valley, About Ayanna's face when she'd killed Rourke, about his brother's grave on that windswept Montana hillside. Yeah, I'm willing. Then you've got my press, Sullivan said. We'll print your story, get it out to every town and mining camp in the territory. Can't promise people will listen, but we'll make damn sure they hear it. The former soldier, a young man named Cooper, who still had nightmares about the villages he'd burned, offered to travel with Caleb. Someone needs to watch your back, he said, and maybe I can be useful. Help you reach other soldiers who are questioning orders, who want out but don't know how. The schoolteacher, a woman named Sarah with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, promised to teach the truth in her classroom. The children deserve to know there are other ways, other choices. I'll make sure they learn. It wasn't an army. It wasn't even a movement. Just 4 people in a saloon making promises they might not be able to keep. But it was a start. Over the following months, Caleb traveled across the frontier territories. He spoke in saloons and churches, at miners' camps and ranchers' gatherings, anywhere people would listen. He told the story of the Sacred Valley over and over, each time finding new ways to make people understand that the violence didn't have to be endless, that peace was possible if enough people chose it. It was hard work, exhausting work. He was threatened, beaten up twice, run out of 3 towns, and shot at more times than he could count. But slowly, incrementally, things began to change. Sullivan's newspaper stories reached other editors who picked up the narrative. Cooper found more former soldiers willing to speak out against the massacres they'd participated in, creating a groundswell of veterans advocating for different policies toward the tribes. Sarah's students grew up and became teachers themselves, spreading the message to new generations. And through it all, Caleb carried Kimi's knife and remembered the valley. On the hardest days, when it seemed like nothing was changing and the violence would never end, he'd close his eyes and picture that green sanctuary hidden in the mountains. He'd remember Ayanna's fierce courage, Takota's hard-won trust, Keme's brotherhood. He'd remember that he'd seen a better way of living, and that made the fighting worthwhile. Years passed. The frontier changed, not all at once, not everywhere, but enough. Treaties were signed and actually honored. Some tribes were still displaced, still suffered, but with less frequency and less brutality. Voices like Caleb's became more common, joined by others who'd seen too much death and wanted something different. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't justice, but it was better than what had been. And better was worth fighting for. On a spring morning 5 years after leaving the Sacred Valley, Caleb found himself riding north through familiar mountains. He was older now, gray threading through his dark hair, new scars layering over old ones. But he was alive, still fighting, still trying. He found the valley exactly as he remembered it. The markers were still there, subtle warnings to those who knew how to read them. He followed the trail, wondering if anyone still lived here, or if they'd scattered, as he'd suggested. As he crested the final ridge and looked down into the valley, his breath caught. It was thriving. Lodges built into the cliff walls, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing by the river. Gardens growing where the killing ground had been. Life, persistent and beautiful, refusing to surrender to the darkness. Warriors appeared from the rocks, bows drawn. Then one of them recognized him. Caleb Ward, the storyteller returns. Word spread quickly. By the time Caleb reached the valley floor, half the tribe had gathered to greet him. Keem was there, older and grayer but still powerful, his smile genuine. Takota stood beside him, that scarred face unreadable until it split into something almost like a smile. And Ayanna. Standing apart from the crowd, older and more beautiful than memory, her eyes finding his across the distance. They met in the center of the valley, the same spot where they'd stood watching work approach 5 years earlier. Neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate after so long. "You came back?" she said finally. "Told you I would. You have been telling stories, changing hearts. I hear tales of you across the territories, the white warrior who speaks for the tribes, who makes people question the old hatreds. Just doing what I can, what Tom would have wanted." He looked around the valley. "You stayed, built something here. We scattered at first, as you suggested, for safety. But after a few years, when no armies came, when the stories you told started spreading, we returned. Made this place a home again. A refuge not just for warriors, but for anyone seeking peace. She smiled. We have even had some white visitors, traders who respect our ways, settlers who ask permission before building on tribal lands. It is not common, but it happens. That's more than I hoped for. Because of you, because of the seeds you planted. She took his hand, the gesture familiar and right. Will you stay this time? Or do you have more stories to tell elsewhere? Caleb thought about that. There were always more stories, more places that needed voices advocating for peace. But he'd been fighting for 5 years straight, and he was tired, bone tired, soul tired. I could stay for a while, he said. If you'll have me? Always. That night they held a feast in his honor. Warriors he'd fought beside shared stories of battles and brotherhood. Young people who'd been children during Rourke's attack asked him about the world beyond the valley. Grandmother Liwanu sat in her place of honor and said nothing, but her eyes twinkled with what Caleb swore was amusement. Kemi pulled him aside after the meal. You have done well, brother. Changed more than we thought possible. The frontier's different because of you. It's different because a lot of people chose to change. I just told the stories. Stories matter. They shape how people see the world, how they see themselves. Kemi clapped him on the shoulder. The bowl with cracks lets the light through. Grandmother was right, as always. What does that mean? She told Ayana to tell me that years ago, but I never understood. It means you were broken by what you experienced, what you did and saw during the war. But those breaks did not destroy you. They let light in, let you see things you could not see when you were whole and unquestioning. The cracks made you better, stronger, more able to help others. Caleb absorbed that, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. Thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance when you had every reason not to. You earned that chance and proved yourself worthy of it. Kimi's expression grew serious. Will you stay now, or will you return to the storytelling? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to rest, to finally stop running and fighting and just be. But part of me knows there's still work to do, still voices that need amplifying. Then rest now, heal. Let the valley restore you the way you once helped restore us. And when you are ready, whether that is tomorrow or next year or never, you will know which path to walk. It was good advice. Caleb took it. He stayed in the valley through the summer and into the fall. He helped repair lodges, worked in the gardens, learned the language properly instead of just surviving on scattered words. He hunted with Keme, listened to Takota's war stories, watched children grow who'd never known the terror of being hunted. And he spent his evenings with Ayana, talking about everything and nothing, slowly building something that felt like a future. What happens when you leave? She asked one night as they sat by the river, the same spot where she'd said goodbye 5 years earlier. Who says I'm leaving? I know you, Caleb Ward. You have a restless spirit, a need to fix what is broken in the world. The valley is healing. We are healing. But there are others who still suffer, still fight, still need voices like yours. Maybe. But I'm tired, Ayana. Tired of always moving, always fighting. Tired of being alone. Then do not be alone. She turned to face him fully. Go where you need to go. Tell the stories that need telling, but come back. Come back to me. To us. Let this be your home even when you are far from it. Let yourself belong somewhere. Is that what you want? Yes. I want you to rest when you are weary, fight when you are strong. Live instead of just surviving. I want you to be happy, Caleb. You have earned that, more than earned it. He kissed her then, gentle and grateful, and felt something inside him finally settle. Not closure exactly, but acceptance of who he was, of what he'd done and failed to do, of the future that stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer empty. That winter he left the valley again, but this time it was different. This time he wasn't running. He was choosing. Going out to do work that mattered, knowing he could return, that he had a home, people who loved him, a place in the world. He traveled with purpose, carrying Keme's knife and Ayana's blessing and his brother's dream. He spoke in towns and territories, met with tribal leaders and government officials, pushed for treaties and policies that honored dignity over dominance. It was slow work, frustrating work, but it was meaningful work. And every spring, he returned to the valley, spent months there helping with the planting, teaching what he'd learned, being part of a community instead of a lone voice crying in the wilderness. Then when fall came and the restlessness returned, he'd head out again with Ayana's kiss still warm on his lips and the knowledge that he was doing what Tom would have wanted. Years accumulated. Caleb's hair went fully gray, his body accumulated new scars and pains, his reputation grew. The storyteller, the peacemaker, the white warrior who'd chosen a different path. Not everyone liked him. Some called him a traitor. Others said he was naive, that he didn't understand the harsh realities of the frontier. But enough people listened, enough people changed, and the frontier, slowly, became a little less violent, a little more open to the possibility that different peoples could coexist without one dominating the other. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. Too much blood had been spilled, too much damage done, but it was better. Measurably, tangibly better. And that was enough. On a summer evening in his 60th year, Caleb sat with Ayana on the same overlook where they'd watched Rourke's army approach decades earlier. They were both gray now, both marked by time and hardship, but still strong, still fighting in their own ways. "Do you have regrets?" Ayana asked. "About the path you chose? The life you lived?" Caleb thought about that, about his brother's grave in Montana, about the warriors who died defending the valley, about all the battles fought and stories told and small victories won at great cost. "No," he said finally, "no regrets. It's been hard, sometimes impossibly hard, but it's been worth it. We changed things, Ayana, maybe not everything, maybe not enough, but something. We proved it was possible to choose differently, to build instead of destroy. That's worth whatever price we paid." What would you tell your younger self? The man who found me bleeding on his doorstep? I'd tell him to trust his instincts, to choose courage over comfort, to understand that the hardest path is usually the right one. Caleb smiled. And I'd tell him he's about to meet the most stubborn, brave, impossible woman on the frontier, and that she's going to change his life in ways he can't imagine. Ayana laughed, the sound carrying across the valley. "You always were better with words than I was. Learned from the best storytellers I know, your people, your history, your way of seeing the world." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. In the valley below, children played. Smoke rose from cook fires. Life continued, ordinary and precious. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly, "for saving me that day. Not just my life, but my soul, my purpose. Everything that makes me who I am." "We saved each other," Ayana replied. "That is how it works, how it always has. One person cannot heal a broken world. But two people choosing to stand together, choosing mercy over vengeance and hope over despair, that can change everything." Caleb took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally after decades of practice. He thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. The choice to help a dying woman, the choice to fight instead of run, the choice to show mercy instead of exact revenge, the choice to tell stories instead of stay silent. Every choice had cost him something. Every choice had given him something more. The frontier still stretched vast and wild around them, beautiful and brutal and forever changing. But somewhere in that wilderness, in valleys and towns and territories scattered across thousands of miles, people were making different choices because of the stories they'd heard, because of the examples they'd seen. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and something was enough. As the stars began emerging in the darkening sky, Caleb Ward, former soldier, deserter, storyteller, warrior, peacemaker, smiled. He'd found what he'd been searching for since the day he walked away from the army. Not peace. Peace was an illusion, a destination that didn't exist. But purpose, connection, the knowledge that his life meant something beyond survival. He'd been broken and remade. The cracks had let the light through, and in that light, he'd found a way to be better than he'd been. To honor his brother's dream. To protect something worth protecting. On a frontier ruled by violence and hatred, he'd proven that another way was possible, that people could choose differently, that love and mercy and stubborn hope could stand against the darkness, and sometimes, just sometimes, win. It was a small victory in a harsh world, but small victories accumulated. built on each other, changed the possible into the real. And that, Caleb thought as the valley settled into peaceful night around him, was a story worth telling, a life worth living, a fight worth fighting until his last breath. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and indifferent. But below them, in a sacred valley where warriors and peacemakers walked together, the future was being written one choice at a time. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Caleb Ward was at peace with the man he'd become.